Welcome to another quiet step into the unknown. Tonight's story slips in softly through the rain-slick alleys of Nagasaki, where lantern light bends in the mist, and shadows keep their own counsel. It moves behind paper walls, past rooms lit only by memory, carrying whispers meant for no one, yet somehow finding you. The night here is not empty. It is watching. It is waiting. It is ready to tell you what it knows. Let the rain hush the world around you. Let the dark hold you close. And if these quiet wanderings bring you comfort, you might consider subscribing or telling us where and when you're listening from. Now, close your eyes and let the whispers find you. The Norran curtain hangs between me and the world I am not yet allowed to enter. Dark indigo cotton, heavy with the day's moisture from Nagasaki Bay. When I press my palm against it, the fabric yields like skin, warm from the bodies that have passed beneath it throughout the evening. The weave is coarse under my fingertips, each thread distinct, like counting prayer beads in the dark. I sit on my heels on the tatami mat, the way Okasan taught me when I first arrived at this okiya 3 seasons ago. My spine straight but not rigid, my breath slow and deep. The reed beneath me has aged to the color of summer grass, worn smooth by countless knees and feet. When I shift my weight, the mat whispers against the wooden floor beneath. Through the paper walls, voices drift like incense smoke. A man's laughter, deep and unfamiliar. The shamisen strings vibrating in the main room, their metallic sweetness threading through the sound of sake cups touching wood. Someone is practicing scales, the same 3 notes repeated over and over, until they become less like music and more like breathing. I fold the small cotton towel in my lap, pressing each crease with deliberate care. The cloth is soft from many washings, still faintly warm from the evening's final rinse. My hands know this motion now, this careful geometry of fabric becoming smaller, becoming neat. When I was a child in the countryside, my grandmother taught me that the way you fold cloth reveals the state of your heart. Rushed folds for a scattered mind, careful folds for careful thoughts. Put the towel becomes a perfect square in my palms. I set it aside and reach for another, this one still damp with the scent of the camellia oil we use for hairs. The smell makes me think of the geisha preparing for evening clients, their long black hair gleaming as they twist it into elaborate styles, securing each strand with lacquered combs and pins that catch the lamplight like small moons. A woman's voice rises above the shamisen, singing a song I almost recognize. The melody curls around the edges of the wooden beams, seeps through the gaps in the shoshi screens. Her voice is trained, controlled, but there's something underneath it that makes my chest tighten. A sadness, maybe, or longing. The same feeling I get when I watch the harbor at sunset, the foreign ship's masts dark against the pink sky. I press my knees together and feel the rough cotton of my yukata against my skin. The fabric has softened since morning, absorbing the day's warmth, the subtle oils from my body. When I breathe deeply, I can smell myself beneath the layers of incense and cooking rice, beneath the perfume that drifts from the rooms beyond the curtain. My own scent is simpler, cleaner, like the soap we make from rice bran and the water we draw from the well behind the kitchen. The shamisen stops. In the silence that follows, I can hear the sound of fabric rustling, the soft thud of a sake bottle being set down. Someone clears their throat, a small, intimate sound that seems too private for me to hear. I wonder if I should cover my ears, but I don't. Instead, I listen harder, trying to distinguish between the sounds that are meant for me and the sounds that are not. A door slides open somewhere in the house, the wooden tracks groaning softly. Footsteps cross the hallway, quick and light. Probably one of the other apprentices, carrying tea or bringing fresh towels to the guests. I imagine her careful steps, her eyes downcast, the way we've all been taught to move through the spaces where we're allowed but not welcomed, necessary but invisible. The footsteps fade, replaced by the distant sound of water running in the washroom. Someone is preparing for bed or preparing for something else. The water stops, starts again. I picture hands moving over skin, soap dissolving in warm water, the careful rituals of cleansing that precede sleep or intimacy. My own hands feel suddenly aware against the cotton in my lap, the calluses on my fingertips from handling rough fabric, the small cuts from kitchen work. Through the wall to my left, I hear the soft sound of a mattress settling under someone's weight, a sigh, long and tired. Then the rustle of bedclothes being pulled up. The house is beginning its slow transition from evening to night, from the public face it wears for clients to the private breath it draws in darkness. I finish folding the last towel and stack them all beside my sleeping mat. The pile is neat, each edge aligned with the others. In the morning, I'll distribute them to the proper rooms. But for now, they sit like a small monument to order in the gathering night. I smooth my yukata over my knees and lean back against the wall, feeling the wooden posts through the thin fabric of my garment. The wood is still warm from the day's heat, even though autumn has begun to creep into the evenings. During the day, when the sun slants through the upper windows, this corner where I sleep becomes almost hot. But now, with only the oil lamps burning in the distant rooms, the warmth is gentler, more human, like being held against someone's chest. I close my eyes and let the sounds of the house wash over me. The creak of floorboards as someone moves through the upper rooms. The distant murmur of conversation, too low for me to make out words, but rhythmic enough to be soothing. Somewhere, a kettle whistles briefly and then falls silent. The ordinary sounds of a house full of people living their separate but connected lives. My breathing slows to match the rhythm of the night sounds. In and out, steady and deep. The way Okazan taught me to breathe when anxiety tightened my chest during those first weeks here. When everything felt strange and dangerous and beautiful all at once. Breathe like the house breathes, she told me, slow and steady with the whole body. I think about the women in the rooms beyond the curtains, their faces painted white with rice powder, their lips red as autumn maple leaves. I've watched them prepare, stealing glances through partially open doors as they transform themselves from the ordinary women. They are in daylight into something more mysterious, more alluring. The process fascinates me, the careful application of powder, the precise lines of kohl around their eyes, the way they test their voices before going out to meet clients. But it also frightens me, this transformation, the way they seem to disappear into their painted faces, becoming someone else entirely. I touch my own cheek, feeling the warmth of unpainted skin, the slight roughness where the autumn wind has chapped me. My face is still my own, still recognizable to the girl who looked back at me from the well water this morning. The conversation in the main room grows quieter, more intimate. I can no longer make out individual voices, only the rise and fall of speech like distant waves. The shamisen starts again, but softer now, more like someone practicing scales in private than performing for an audience. The notes drift through the walls and settle around me like falling leaves. I pull my knees up to my chest and wrap my arms around them, making myself smaller in the small space. The position reminds me of childhood, of hiding in the root cellar during storms, listening to the rain drum against the wooden doors above my head. But this is different. This hiding is not from danger, but from a world I'm not yet ready to enter, a world that will claim me eventually, but allows me this brief time of watching and waiting. My stomach growls softly, reminding me that I ate dinner early, before the guests arrived. A simple meal of rice and pickled vegetables, eaten quickly in the kitchen, while the cook prepared more elaborate dishes for the evening service. I'm not hungry enough to seek food, but the sound makes me aware of my body in a way I usually try to ignore during these evening vigils. I think about the hot bath I'll take tomorrow morning, before the house fully wakes. The wooden tub filled with water heated over the kitchen fire, scented with a few drops of the camellia oil that makes skin soft and hair shine. I'll sink into that water and let it wash away the night's accumulated sounds and smells, preparing myself for another day of watching and learning and waiting. But that's tomorrow. Tonight I am here behind the curtain, part of the house, but separate from its primary purpose. I am the apprentice who folds towels and listens to shamisen music, who breathes the perfumed air but doesn't yet know what it means to wear perfume for someone else. I am the girl who touches cotton and tatami and her own skin with equal wonder, finding in these simple textures a world complex enough to fill the long hours until dawn. The house settles around me like a living thing finding its position for sleep. Beams expand and contract with the cooling air. Paper screens rustle in drafts I cannot feel. Somewhere above me, water runs through pipes, a modern convenience that still seems miraculous after the well water of my childhood. The sound is soothing, domestic, the promise of cleanliness and comfort. I uncurl my legs and stretch them out on the tatami, feeling the blood flow back into muscles that have been folded too long. My toes tingle as sensation returns, and I wiggle them inside my cotton toby socks, enjoying the simple pleasure of movement after stillness. The socks are hand-knitted, a gift from one of the geisha who took pity on my store-bought ones, full of holes and poorly fitting, These socks fit perfectly, following the curve of my foot, the space between my big toe and the others. When I wear them, I feel held, cared for in a way that's both practical and tender. The woman who made them, Yuki, with her quick fingers and quicker smile, told me that knitting is like music, all rhythm and repetition, until pattern emerges from what seemed like chaos. I think about patterns now, about the rhythms that govern life in this house. The morning ritual of cleaning and preparation, the afternoon hours of rest and practice, the evening transformation as the house prepares to receive guests, and then this time, after the clients have been welcomed, but before the deeper intimacies of the night begin, when I sit behind my curtain and absorb what I can of a world I am being prepared to enter. The shamisen stops again, and this time the silence feels different, more complete, more settled. I hear the soft sound of sake cups being collected, the rustle of clothing as people prepare to move to other rooms, other activities. The public part of the evening is ending, giving way to whatever private arrangements have been made between the geisha and their clients. I should sleep soon. The morning comes early in an okiya, and there's always work to be done before the house fully wakes. But I'm not quite ready to let go of this suspended time, this moment between day and night when I feel most myself, most aware of the strange and beautiful circumstances that have brought me here. Through the curtain, I catch a glimpse of shadow moving across the wall, a woman's silhouette, graceful and unfamiliar, probably one of the guests being led to a private room. The shadow pauses, and for a moment I wonder if she can sense me here, if my presence behind the curtain is as obvious to her as hers is to me. But then the shadow moves on, and I'm alone again with the night's sounds and the weight of fabric in my lap. I fold one more towel, even though the basket is empty. My hands need the motion, the familiar sequence of actions that calms my mind and prepares my body for sleep. This towel is my own, rough cotton dyed indigo, practical rather than beautiful. But as I fold it, I imagine it's made of silk. Imagine my hands are the practiced hands of a geisha, preparing for a client, each movement deliberate and graceful. The fantasy doesn't last long. My hands are too young, too obviously the hands of someone who does laundry rather than receives gifts of silk kimono. But there's pleasure in the imagining, in the brief transformation of mundane action into something more significant. This is what I am learning here, I think, not just how to pour tea or arrange flowers, but how to find the extraordinary within the ordinary, how to make even the simplest gesture carry weight and meaning. I set the folded towel aside and lean back against the wall, closing my eyes. The house continues to settle around me, but the sounds are softer now, more distant. Someone laughs, but quietly, as if trying not to wake sleeping children. A door slides shut with barely a whisper. Water runs briefly in the kitchen sink. My body begins to relax into the familiar position, spine against the wall, legs folded beneath me. This has become my nighttime posture, the way I sit when the day's work is done and the evening's work belongs to others. I am comfortable here, in this liminal space between participation and observation, between childhood and whatever comes next. Be oil lamp in the hallway, gutters, and goes out, casting this corner into deeper shadow. But my eyes have adjusted to the darkness, and I can still make out the familiar shapes around me. The neat stack of towels, the edge of my sleeping mat, the heavy drape of the Norrin curtain that separates me from the world beyond. I think about that world, about the rooms where geisha sit with clients, their conversations a careful dance of suggestion and restraint. I imagine the sound of sake being poured, the rustle of silk kimono, the soft laughter that seems to carry promises I don't yet understand. Someday I will be part of that world, will learn its codes and customs, its rituals of seduction and satisfaction, but not tonight. Tonight I am still the apprentice behind the curtain, the girl who folds towels and listens to shamisen music, who finds mystery enough in the texture of cotton against her palms and the sound of her own breathing in the dark. This is my time, these hours, when the house belongs as much to watchers as to participants, when simply being present is enough. The last of the evening's conversation fades to a murmur, then to silence. I hear footsteps on the stairs, voices saying good night in the formal, careful tones that indicate the business part of the evening is truly over. Soon the house will settle into its deepest rest, and I will unroll my sleeping mat and join that collective slumber. But for now, I remain sitting, breathing with the rhythm of the settling house. My hands still warm from handling cloth, my body still alert to every sound and sensation. This is meditation, though I wouldn't have called it that before coming here. This quiet attention to the present moment, this acceptance of my place in the larger pattern of the house's life. I touch the Norrin curtain one more time, pressing my palm against the indigo cotton, feeling the slight give of the fabric, the coolness that has replaced the day's warmth. Tomorrow this curtain will lift to admit clients, will fall behind departing guests, will mark the boundary between public and private, between performance and rest. But right now it simply hangs, heavy and still, a blue-black barrier that protects as much as it conceals. My eyes grow heavy, but I resist sleep a little longer, wanting to hold onto this particular moment, this specific configuration of shadow and sound and sensation. There will be other nights, other sessions of listening and folding and breathing in the dark. But this night is unique, unrepeatable, deserving of my full attention for as long as I can maintain it. The house breathes around me, its wooden bones creaking softly as temperature and humidity shift. Somewhere in the walls, a mouse scurries between hidden spaces, its tiny claws scratching against wood. A night bird calls from the garden, its voice thin and sweet in the cooling air. These sounds layer over each other like instruments in an orchestra, creating a symphony of domesticity and peace. I let my eyes close finally, not in sleep, but in a deeper kind of listening, an attention that uses more than vision. With my eyes closed, I can hear the faint whisper of my own pulse, the soft rush of air moving in and out of my lungs. I can feel the tatami beneath me, still holding a hint of the day's warmth. I can smell the lingering traces of incense and cooking oil, the green scent of the tatami, the cleaner smell of the cotton fabric in my lap. This is how I learn, I realize, not through instruction or observation alone, but through this kind of embodied attention, this willingness to sit quietly and absorb whatever the moment offers. The geisha upstairs learn through practice and repetition, through the careful correction of masters and the accumulated wisdom of tradition. But I learn through stillness, through the patient cultivation of receptivity. The thought satisfies me in a way that more active kinds of learning never have. I am good at waiting, good at listening, good at finding significance in small details and quiet moments. These skills will serve me well when I begin my formal training, when I must learn to read the subtle communications between geisha and client, the unspoken negotiations that govern intimacy. But they serve me well now too, in this apprenticeship of attention, this education in the textures and rhythms of a life I'm slowly growing into. Every night behind this curtain teaches me something new about patience, about presence, about the particular kind of awareness that allows someone to be fully where they are, rather than always reaching toward what comes next. A final sound drifts through the wall, a woman's voice, soft and wordless, somewhere between speaking and singing. It might be a lullaby, or it might be something else entirely, something meant for private ears in a private room. I don't try to interpret it, don't strain to hear more clearly. Instead, I let it wash over me like water, like night air, like all the other sounds that make up the complex music of this house after dark. My breathing slows further, matching some deeper rhythm that seems to rise from the house itself, from the accumulated rest of all the people settling into sleep within these walls. I am part of that collective now, part of the larger organism that the okiya becomes at night, when individual purposes merge into the shared need for restoration and peace. The cotton towel slips from my lap to the tatami beside me, but I don't retrieve it. My hands rest open on my knees, palms up, empty and ready. This is how I'll sleep when I finally lie down, open, receptive, trusting that the night will bring whatever dreams or rest my body needs to prepare for another day of learning, another day of careful attention to the world I'm slowly becoming part of. For now, though, I sit, I breathe, I listen to the house breathing around me, its rhythm steady and sure, a wooden heart beating in the darkness of Nagasaki night. Behind the curtain, I am safe and separate, held and hidden, learning the most essential skill of all, how to be present in my own skin, in my own moment, in my own small corner of a larger and more beautiful world. The Noren curtain hangs between me and the world I am not yet allowed to enter. Dark indigo cotton, heavy with the day's moisture from Nagasaki Bay. When I press my palm against it, the fabric yields like skin, warm from the bodies that have passed beneath it throughout the evening. The weave is coarse under my fingertips, each thread distinct, like counting prayer beads in the dark. I sit on my heels on the tatami mat, the way Okasan taught me when I first arrived at this okiya 3 seasons ago. my spine straight but not rigid, my breath slow and deep. The reed beneath me has aged to the color of summer grass, worn smooth by countless knees and feet. When I shift my weight, the mat whispers against the wooden floor beneath. Through the paper walls, voices drift like incense smoke. A man's laughter, deep and unfamiliar. The shamisen strings vibrating in the main room, their metallic sweetness threading through the sound of sake cups touching wood. Someone is practicing scales, the same 3 notes repeated over and over, until they become less like music and more like breathing. I fold the small cotton towel in my lap, pressing each crease with deliberate care. The cloth is soft from many washings, still faintly warm from the evening's final rinse. My hands know this motion now, this careful geometry of fabric becoming smaller, becoming neat. When I was a child in the countryside, my grandmother taught me that the way you fold cloth reveals the state of your heart. Rushed folds for a scattered mind, careful, bold for careful thoughts. The side door slides open with only the faintest whisper of wood against wood. I've oiled these tracks myself as part of my daily duties. And now I'm grateful for the maintenance that allows me to move through the house without announcing my presence to the sleeping inhabitants. The night air that greets me is cooler than the indoor warmth, carrying the scent of autumn flowers and the distant salt of Nagasaki Bay. I step onto the narrow veranda that runs along this side of the building, my bare feet finding the smooth wooden planks worn soft by years of weather and use. The wood still holds a trace of the day's heat, but it's fading rapidly in the cooling night. I curl my toes against the warmth, enjoying the contrast between the temperature of the boards and the cooler air moving across my exposed skin. The garden spreads before me in shades of silver and deep green, lit by a moon that appears and disappears behind shifting clouds. The stone path that leads to the bathhouse is pale in the moonlight, each carefully placed rock casting its own small shadow. I've walked this path dozens of times, during daylight hours, carrying towels and soap, preparing the bath for the geisha who will soak away their face powder and performance in the privacy of steaming water. But I've never walked it at night, never seen how the familiar landscape transforms in darkness. The herbs that border the path, shiso and mitsuba, ginger and green onions, seem more fragrant in the cool air, their scents concentrated and mysterious. When I brush against a low branch of the camellia tree, night-bloomed petals fall around my feet like scattered thoughts. I step down from the veranda onto the path, gasping softly as my bare feet touch the cool stone. The sensation is startling after the warmth of wood and tatami, but pleasant to grounding me in the immediate reality of temperature and texture. Each stone has been worn smooth by weather and the passage of many feet, polished to a finish that feels almost silky under my soles. The bathhouse stands at the end of the path, a small wooden structure that houses the deep cedar tub and the carefully designed system of pipes that brings hot water from the kitchen fires. During the day, it's a place of practical necessity, where bodies are cleaned and prepared for the day's work or the night's performance. But now, empty and waiting, It seems to hold different possibilities, intimate spaces for solitude rather than simple hygiene. I pause at the entrance, suddenly aware of the audacity of what I'm contemplating. The bathhouse is meant to be shared, used according to schedule and hierarchy, with the apprentices bathing only after the geisha have finished, and only when our duties permit, taking a solitary bath in the middle of the night, using water and fuel that belong to the okiya rather than to me personally, crosses boundaries that I'm not supposed to even approach. But the night feels like a suspension of ordinary rules, a time when the usual structures of permission and prohibition give way to something more fluid, more responsive to immediate need than to established custom. And there is a need in me, I realize, that goes beyond simple cleanliness, a need to be alone with water and warmth, to feel my own body without the context of work or observation, to discover what solitude feels like when it's chosen rather than assigned. I slide open the door to the bathhouse and step inside, breathing in the warm, humid air that always lingers here, scented with cedar and the mineral traces of well water. The wooden tub dominates the small space, its pale interior glowing faintly in the moonlight that filters through the high window. Beside it, the water heating system waits, cold now, but ready to be coaxed back to life. I know this system well from my daily duties. How to adjust the flow of water from the storage tank. How to kindle the fire in the small firebox that heats the pipes. How to test the temperature with the back of my hand rather than my fingertips, which are less sensitive to gradations of heat. The process takes time, requires patience and attention, but these are skills I've developed during my months in the okiya. I begin by preparing tinder, shaving thin curls of wood from the kindling box into a small nest of dry material. My hands move automatically through the familiar motions, but my mind is elsewhere, caught between the practical focus required for fire-making and a growing awareness of my own body in the enclosed space. The cotton of my yukata brushes against my arms as I work, reminding me of the skin beneath the fabric of the body that I'm preparing to expose to water and night air. The first flame catches, small and tentative, then grows as I feed it carefully selected pieces of progressively larger wood. Soon I have a steady fire burning in the heating chamber, and I can hear the first whispers of steam beginning to move through the pipes. The process will take time, perhaps an hour before the water reaches the perfect temperature for bathing. But time is something I have in abundance tonight. While the water heats, I sit on the wooden platform beside the tub, letting my legs dangle over the edge like a child at a pond. The position reminds me of summer evenings in my childhood, sitting on the bridge over the rice paddies while the frogs sang their complex harmonies and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. That seems like a different life now, a different girl. But the memory brings a warmth that has nothing to do with the fire beginning to heat the bath water. I think about that other girl, the one who helped her grandmother with silkworms and learned to read the weather in the behavior of insects and birds. She was practical in a different way than I am now, skilled in the rhythms of agriculture rather than the subtleties of urban entertainment. But there are connections between that life and this one, threads of attention and patience that have carried forward even as everything else has changed. The sound of water beginning to circulate through the pipes brings me back to the present moment. I can hear the faint bubbling that indicates the heating system is working properly, can smell the first traces of warming cedar as the tub begins to prepare itself for use. My body responds to these sensory cues with a kind of anticipation that surprises me in its intensity, as if every cell is already imagining the sensation of slipping into hot water, of letting heat penetrate muscle and bone. I stand and begin to untie the loose knot that holds my yukata closed at the waist. The cotton belt falls away easily, and the garment opens like flower petals, exposing the pale curves of my body to the warm, humid air. I let the fabric slide from my shoulders, let it pool around my feet on the wooden platform. For a moment, I simply stand naked in the steamy darkness, feeling the night air move across skin that is usually hidden, usually protected by layers of cloth and propriety. My body feels different when it's completely unclothed, more alive somehow, more responsive to every shift in temperature and air pressure. I can feel the warmth rising from the heating pipes beneath the platform, can sense the cooler draft that enters through the gaps in the wooden walls. My skin seems to expand in the freedom from constraint, seems to breathe in a way it cannot when bound by even the loosest clothing. I touch my own shoulder experimentally, trailing my fingertips along the curve from neck to the point where my arm begins. The sensation is familiar. I wash myself daily, know the geography of my own body, but somehow different in this context, this chosen solitude. My skin feels softer than usual, more receptive to touch, as if the night air has sensitized nerve endings that daylight dulls. The water is not yet ready, but I can feel its approaching warmth in the increasing humidity. The way the air itself seems to thicken with moisture and heat. I sit again on the platform, this time with my naked skin in direct contact with the smooth wood. The sensation is startling at first. The wood is cooler than my body temperature, and the contrast makes me gasp softly. But within moments, the platform begins to warm under my weight, my body heat creating a small zone of perfect temperature. I close my eyes and listen to the sounds of water moving through pipes, fire consuming wood, the gradual transformation of cold elements into the promise of warmth and cleansing. These are domestic sounds, the sounds of human comfort being prepared with patience and skill. But in the darkness of the bathhouse, alone with my own breathing and heartbeat, they seem more primal, more connected to basic needs that transcend the social complexities of okiya life. My hands rest on my bare thighs, palms down, fingers spread. The skin here is soft, unmarked by the work that has calloused my fingertips and roughened my knuckles. I trace slow circles with my thumbs, not seeking arousal, but simply exploring the texture and temperature of my own flesh. The way muscle and fat create curves and hollows. The way blood moves close to the surface in some places and deeper in others. I touch my own shoulder experimentally, trailing my fingertips along the curve from neck to the point where my arm begins. The sensation is familiar. I wash myself daily, know the geography of my own body, but somehow different in this context, this chosen solitude. My skin feels softer than usual, more receptive to touch, as if the night air has sensitized nerve endings that daylight dulls. The water is not yet ready, but I can feel its approaching warmth in the increasing humidity. The way the air itself seems to thicken with moisture and heat. I sit again on the platform, this time with my naked skin in direct contact with the smooth wood. The sensation is startling at first. The wood is cooler than my body temperature, and the contrast makes me gasp softly. But within moments, the platform begins to warm under my weight, my body heat creating a small zone of perfect temperature. I close my eyes and listen to the sounds of water moving through pipes, fire consuming wood, the gradual transformation of cold elements into the promise of warmth and cleansing. These are domestic sounds, the sounds of human comfort being prepared with patience and skill, but in the darkness of the bathhouse, alone with my own breathing and heartbeat, they seem more primal, more connected to basic needs that transcend the social complexities of okiya life. My hands rest on my bare thighs, palms down, fingers spread. The skin here is soft, unmarked by the work that has calloused my fingertips and roughened my knuckles. I trace slow circles with my thumbs, not seeking arousal, but simply exploring the texture and temperature of my own flesh. The way muscle and fat create curves and hollows. The way blood moves close to the surface in some places and deeper in others. A sound from outside makes me freeze, hands still against my skin, ears straining to identify what I've heard. Footsteps, perhaps, or the sound of a door opening. But after a long moment of listening, I hear nothing more, and I realize it was probably just the house settling, or a night bird disturbing the branches outside the window. The residents of the okiya are deep in sleep by now, exhausted by the day's performances and the night's entertainments. The interruption has made me more aware of my vulnerability, sitting naked in a building separate from the main house, with no quick way to cover myself if someone should appear. But rather than anxiety, this awareness brings a strange kind of exhilaration, a sense of risk that makes my skin tingle and my breathing quicken. I am doing something transgressive, claiming time and space and resources that are not officially mine. And the knowledge makes me feel more awake than I have in weeks. I test the water temperature with the tip of one toe, finding it finally warm enough for bathing. Not hot yet. The cedar tub holds a large volume of water, and it takes time for the heat to penetrate throughout, but warm enough to enter without shock. I stand carefully, on the platform beside the tub, balancing on one foot while I swing the other leg over the wooden rim. The sensation of warm water closing around my ankle and calf is immediate and profound, like stepping into liquid comfort. I pause with one foot in the tub and one on the platform, letting my body adjust to the new temperature before committing fully to the bath. The water feels alive against my skin, moving and circulating as the heating system continues to work, creating small currents that seem to caress rather than simply surround. I step completely into the tub, gasping as the water rises to my knees, then my thighs, then the sensitive skin of my lower belly. The heat penetrates quickly, spreading through muscle and bone with a sense of release that makes me sigh involuntarily. I lower myself gradually, letting the water rise over my hips, my waist, finally settling into a sitting position that brings the warmth up to my breasts. The sensation is overwhelming for a moment. Heat and pressure and the particular weightlessness that comes with water displacement. My body seems to dissolve at the edges, the boundaries between skin and liquid becoming uncertain. I close my eyes and let my head fall back against the rim of the tub, feeling my hair float around my shoulders like dark seaweed. This is luxury of a kind I've never experienced. This solitude in hot water, this freedom to let my body relax completely without concern for time or propriety or the presence of others. In my childhood, bathing was a quick, practical affair. Cold water and harsh soap. Efficiency prioritized over comfort. Since coming to the okiya, my baths have been scheduled and supervised, part of the daily routine of hygiene that keeps apprentices clean and presentable for their duties. But this bath is different. This bath belongs entirely to me, to the secret self that emerges only in darkness and solitude. The self that exists apart from duties and expectations and the constant awareness of being observed and evaluated. In the hot water, I am not an apprentice or a servant or a girl being prepared for a particular kind of work. I am simply a body learning to appreciate pleasure, a consciousness discovering what it means to be fully present in skin and sensation. I slide deeper into the water, letting it rise to my neck, feeling my hair fan out around my head like a dark halo. The heat has penetrated completely now, relaxing muscles I didn't realize were tense, dissolving the accumulated stress of days filled with careful attention to other people's needs and preferences. My breathing slows and deepens, falling into rhythm with the gentle circulation of the water around my body. The fire continues to burn beneath the tub. From the rest of the world, making this space feel complete and self-contained. I lift one arm from the water, watching droplets stream from my fingers back into the tub. The water that clings to my skin feels different from the water I'm sitting in, cooler, more aware of air temperature and movement. I let my arms settle back beneath the surface, enjoying the contrast. I work the soap between my palms until it creates a rich lather, then begin to smooth the bubbles over my skin, starting with my shoulders and working downward. The sensation of my own hands moving over my wet body is intensely pleasurable. Not sexual exactly, but deeply satisfying. As if I'm discovering the landscape of my own flesh for the first time. The soap makes my skin impossibly slick, and my hands glide over curves and angles with an ease that feels almost magical. I take time with each area, the long lines of my arms, the sensitive skin beneath my breasts, my hands know this body from daily washing, but tonight the familiar becomes extraordinary, transformed by solitude and intention into something approaching reverence. I rinse the soap from my arms and shoulders, letting the water carry away the lather in small clouds that disperse and disappear. The water itself seems softer now, silkier, as if the soap has changed not just my skin, but the medium in which I'm floating. I can feel every small current as the heating system continues to circulate warmth throughout the tub, can sense the way my own movements create ripples that eventually return to caress the skin that created them. The heat has made me drowsy, but it's a pleasant drowsiness, the kind that comes from deep relaxation rather than exhaustion. My eyelids feel heavy, but I resist the temptation to close them, wanting to remain aware of every sensation, every moment of this stolen luxury. Through the high window, I can see clouds still moving across the moon, their shadows creating a constantly shifting pattern of light and darkness. I think about the women who will use this tub tomorrow night, the geisha returning from their evening's work to wash away the paint and performance, to let their skin breathe after hours of being someone other than themselves. I wonder if any of them ever feel what I'm feeling now, this sense of the bath as sanctuary, as a space where the essential self can emerge from beneath the layers of social expectation and professional necessity. My hair floats around me like dark silk, and I gather it in my hands, squeezing out the excess water before letting it fall again. The sensation of wet hair against my shoulders and back is sensual in a way that surprises me, each strand carrying coolness and weight, creating patterns of touch that seem to map the contours of my upper body. I lean forward in the tub, resting my arms on my drawn-up knees, and feel the water shift around me in response to the change in position. This new posture brings different muscles into play, creates different pressures and releases. The water now reaches only to my lower back, leaving my shoulders and arms exposed to the steamy air. The contrast makes me more aware of both sensations, the liquid embraced below and the humid caress above. Time seems suspended in the bathhouse, unmarked by the usual rhythms of duty and schedule that govern my days. I have no idea how long I've been soaking, whether it's been minutes or hours since I first stepped into the water. The fire continues to burn steadily beneath the tub, maintaining the perfect temperature that makes it possible to remain submerged indefinitely, to let the heat work its way deeper and deeper into muscle and bone. A small sound from outside draws my attention, the soft plash of water against stone, probably condensation dripping from the bathhouse roof into the rain barrel that collects water for the garden. The sound is rhythmic, meditative, like a water clock marking time in a way that feels natural rather than mechanical. I listen to it for a while, letting it become part of the sensory environment that surrounds me. My skin has begun to wrinkle slightly from the prolonged immersion, the pads of my fingers developing the characteristic texture that comes from extended contact with water. I examine my fingertips in the dim light, fascinated by this temporary transformation, the way my body adapts to its environment even in small, visible ways. The wrinkles make my fingers more sensitive to texture, and when I trail them through the water, I can feel every small variation in temperature and current. I close my eyes, finally, letting the drowsiness claim more of my attention. But even with my eyes closed, I remain intensely aware of my body, of the water surrounding it, of the gentle heat that continues to penetrate from the fires below. This awareness is different from the self-consciousness that usually accompanies physical sensation. It's more accepting, more curious, less concerned with judgment or comparison. The water laps gently against the sides of the tub as I shift position slightly, settling more deeply into the embrace of heat and liquid. My breathing has become almost imperceptibly slow, matching the rhythm of the water's movement, the soft sounds of the fire, the steady drip of condensation outside the window. I feel integrated into the environment of the bathhouse, part of its system of heat and moisture and gentle sound. The heat has penetrated so deeply now that I feel transformed, as if my entire body has become more flexible, more fluid. When I move, muscles respond with unusual ease. Joints articulate without the small resistances that usually accompany motion. I feel like I could dissolve entirely into the water, become part of the liquid environment that surrounds and supports me. But even as I luxuriate in the sensation of dissolution, I remain aware of my boundaries, of the skin that separates interior from exterior, self from world. The water touches every accessible surface of my body, but it cannot penetrate beyond the barrier of skin, cannot access the thoughts and feelings that remain purely internal. This awareness of boundary, paradoxically, makes me more conscious of what lies within that boundary. The complex inner world of sensation and emotion and memory, that no amount of heat or liquid comfort can directly reach. I slide lower in the tub, letting the water rise to my chin, feeling my hair spread around my head like a dark cloud. In this position, the water covers almost all of my body, leaving only my face exposed to the steamy air. The sensation is oddly protective, as if the water has become a liquid garment, a second skin that provides both warmth and modest covering. My ears are just below the surface, and I can hear the muffled sounds of the bathhouse's mechanical systems. The circulation of water through pipes, the soft roar of fire-consuming wood, the gentle bubbling that indicates proper heating. These sounds are transformed by the water into something deeper, more resonant, like hearing the ocean from underwater. They create a kind of acoustic cocoon that seems to separate me from the ordinary world of air and solid objects. I lift my head slightly, bringing my ears above the surface, and the familiar sounds return with sharp clarity. The contrast makes me aware of how profoundly environment affects perception, how the same phenomena can seem entirely different depending on the medium through which they're experienced. This seems like a metaphor for something larger, the way consciousness itself can be altered by context, by the particular circumstances that surround and shape awareness. The fire beneath the tub is beginning to burn lower, and I can sense the gradual reduction in heat input, even though the water temperature remains constant. The thermal mass of all that heated water will maintain comfortable bathing temperature for some time yet, but eventually the cooling will begin, and with it the signal that this interlude of solitude and sensation must come to an end. But not yet. For now the heat holds steady. The water continues its gentle circulation, and I remain suspended in liquid comfort, floating in a space that seems to exist outside the normal flow of time and obligation. My body has achieved a state of relaxation so complete that I can barely feel. The boundaries between muscle groups can hardly distinguish between the parts of me that usually announce themselves through tension or fatigue. I think about the other apprentices, asleep now on their thin mattresses, their dreams, perhaps, filled with the anxieties and aspirations that come with our uncertain position in the hierarchy of the okiya. I wonder if any of them ever feel the need I felt tonight, the need to claim solitude, to experience their own bodies as something more than instruments of service, vessels being prepared for eventual use by others. The thought brings a momentary sadness, a recognition of how much of our time belongs to other people, how little space we're given to discover who we might be when no one is watching. No one is evaluating. No one is preparing us for futures we may or may not want. But the sadness passes quickly, dissolved by the immediate pleasure of warm water and the knowledge that, for this moment at least, I belong entirely to myself. I cup water in my hands and let it stream through my fingers, watching the droplets catch what little light filters through the window. Each drop seems to carry its own small portion of heat and moisture, its own brief existence before rejoining the larger body of water in the tub. The metaphor is not lost on me. Individual moments of sensation and awareness emerging from and returning to the larger flow of experience, each one unique but connected to all the others. My skin has achieved that perfect state of warmth where it no longer registers temperature distinctly, but simply exists in comfortable equilibrium with its environment. This is the goal of all bathing, I realize. Not just cleanliness, but this sense of physical harmony, this temporary resolution of the constant small tensions between body and world, between the needs of flesh and the demands of circumstance. I close my eyes again and let my head rest against the back of the tub, feeling the water support the weight of my skull, my neck, my shoulders. In this position, I'm almost floating, almost weightless, my body buoyed by liquid embrace. The sensation reminds me of descriptions I've heard of being in the womb, suspended in fluid warmth, existing without effort or intention, simply being. The comparison brings with it a sense of return, of coming home to a state of being that preceded consciousness, preceded language, preceded all the complications that come with existing in social spaces, among other people with their own needs and desires and expectations. For these moments in the bath, I am reduced to essential elements: warmth, wetness, the simple pleasure of embodied existence. But even as I relax into this primitive comfort, I remain aware of the sophistication that makes it possible. The carefully engineered heating system, the precisely cut cedar planks that form the tub, the cultural traditions that have elevated bathing from mere necessity to something approaching ritual. This bath is both natural and artificial, both simple and complex, both ancient and thoroughly modern. The paradox seems fitting for my own situation, suspended as I am between childhood and adulthood, between the rural simplicity of my origins and the urban sophistication I'm learning to navigate. Like the bath water, I exist in a state of transition, heated by forces I don't completely understand, shaped by containers that were designed for purposes I'm only beginning to grasp. The water around me has become perfectly still, no longer circulating as the heating system cycles off. In the stillness, I can feel my own heartbeat transmitted through the liquid, can sense the small movements of breathing, the micro-adjustments my body makes to maintain position and comfort. This intimate awareness of my own vital processes seems to expand the boundaries of self-knowledge, to include functions that usually operate below the threshold of consciousness. I open my eyes and look up at the ceiling of the bathhouse, where steam has condensed into tiny droplets that cling to the wooden beams like suspended jewels. The sight reminds me of spider webs heavy with morning dew, of the way moisture can transform the most ordinary surfaces into something magical and strange. Everything seems touched by mystery tonight. The familiar made foreign by darkness and solitude, and the particular consciousness that emerges in states of deep relaxation. A sound from outside breaks the spell slightly, the distant call of a night bird, lonely and sweet. The sound reminds me that the world continues beyond the walls of the bathhouse, that dawn will eventually come, that this interlude of perfect solitude must have boundaries, even if those boundaries are invisible from within the experience itself. But the reminder doesn't diminish the intensity of the present moment. If anything, the knowledge that this luxury is temporary makes me more appreciative of it, more determined to extract every possible sensation and insight from the time that remains. I settle deeper into the water, letting it rise higher on my neck, feeling the heat penetrate the last reserves of muscle tension. My hands float beside me in the water, palms up, fingers slightly curved, like lilies opening to receive rain. The position feels receptive, welcoming, open to whatever the night might offer. And the night has offered so much. Already, solitude, warmth, the rediscovery of my own body as a source of pleasure rather than simply an instrument of work. The reminder that even in the most constrained circumstances, there are possibilities for freedom, for choice, for the assertion of individual will. The fire beneath the tub finally dies to embers, and I can sense the beginning of the slow cooling process that will eventually make the water uncomfortable. But that eventuality still feels distant. The thermal mass of heated water sufficient to maintain luxury for some time yet. I have time to simply exist in this state of liquid suspension. Time to let the experience penetrate as deeply as the heat has penetrated my muscles and bones. I think about heat itself, about the mystery of energy transformation that allows wood to become flame, flame to become warmth, warmth to make water comfortable for human skin. The whole process seems miraculous when I consider it closely. The collaboration between human design and natural forces that creates the possibility for this simple pleasure, this momentary harmony between body and environment. And I think about water, about its unique properties that make it essential for life, for cleanliness, for this particular kind of comfort that seems to dissolve the boundaries between self and world, while paradoxically making me more aware of both. Water as medium, as environment, as metaphor for the fluid nature of identity itself. The way consciousness adapts to whatever contains it while maintaining its essential character. These thoughts arise and dissolve like steam, present but not insistent, part of the contemplative mood that the bath has induced. I am not trying to understand anything, not seeking insights or revelations, simply allowing my mind to move with the same fluid ease that characterizes my body in the heated water. This is meditation without effort, awareness without strain, the kind of natural mindfulness that emerges when conditions are perfect for letting go. The water laps gently against my throat as I swallow, the small motion creating ripples that spread outward and eventually return, transformed by their journey around the circumference of the tub. I can feel these returning waves as gentle pressure against my skin, the water's way of acknowledging my presence within its embrace, my participation in its closed system of circulation and reflection. My breathing has become so slow and deep that each inhalation seems to take forever, each exhalation to release not just air but tension, anxiety, all the accumulated stress of existing in social spaces where every gesture is observed and evaluated. The bath has become a space of pure privacy, pure solitude, where I can breathe without considering how that breathing peers to others, where I can exist without performing existence. This is the deepest luxury, I realize, not the heat or the perfectly engineered comfort, but this permission to simply be, to exist without purpose or goal, beyond the immediate experience of existing. In the okiya, even rest serves a purpose, prepares us for the next day's duties, the next stage of training. But this bath exists outside that economy of preparation and service, belongs to the part of me that will always remain untrained, unformed, essentially private. The realization brings with it a sense of protection, of having discovered something that cannot be taken away, even if every other freedom is circumscribed. As long as consciousness remains intact, as long as sensation continues to register and memory continues to form, there will be this interior space that belongs entirely to the self that experiences, the self that feels and remembers and dreams in the darkness behind closed eyes. I float my arms wider in the water, spreading them like wings, feeling the increased resistance as I create more surface area for the liquid to press against. The motion requires more effort, engages muscles that have been dormant in the perfect equilibrium of stillness. But the effort feels good, reminds me that I have agency within this environment, that even in the most receptive states, I remain capable of choice and movement and change. The water swirls around me in response to my movements, creating currents that caress skin made hypersensitive by heat and prolonged immersion. I can feel each eddy and flow as a distinct sensation, can track the path of disturbed water as it circulates around the tub and eventually returns to stillness. This is physics made sensual, the abstract laws of fluid dynamics experienced as pleasure, as the intimate conversation between body and medium. I settle back into stillness, letting the water calm around me, but remain aware of my power to disturb that calm, to create motion and response through the simple exercise of will. This seems important somehow, the knowledge that even in the most passive states, agency remains available, that receptivity and action exist not as opposites, but as different phases of the same larger cycle. The moon emerges from behind clouds, casting brighter light through the bathhouse window. In the increased illumination, I can see the surface of the water more clearly, can observe the way it reflects and refracts light, creating patterns that shift and change with even the smallest movement. My body, pale beneath the water, seems to glow with its own inner light, transformed by liquid and heat into something more luminous than ordinary flesh. I raise one hand from the water, watching droplets stream from my fingers in silver threads. The water that clings to my skin catches the moonlight, turning my arm into something jeweled and strange, beautiful in a way that daylight never reveals. This is another gift of solitude, the opportunity to see myself as beautiful without reference to others, pindins, to appreciate the simple fact of embodied existence without the complications of desire or judgment. The beauty feels impersonal, not connected to vanity or pride, but to the larger beauty of water and light, and the mysterious process that has created consciousness, capable of recognizing beauty when it appears. I am not beautiful. Rather, beauty is moving through me, using my eyes to see, put itself, my skin, to feel its own luminous presence in the world. The philosophical mood passes, replaced by simple physical appreciation for the continued warmth, the ongoing luxury of floating in perfectly heated water, while the night air grows cooler outside the bathhouse walls. This is enough, I think. This immediate pleasure, this momentary harmony between body and environment, this brief suspension of all the forces that usually pull consciousness in multiple directions simultaneously. I settled deeper into the water one final time, letting it rise to just below my lower lip, feeling my breath create small ripples on the surface. From this position, the world shrinks to the small circle illuminated by moonlight, the gentle sounds of cooling embers and settling wood, the complex sensations of skin in contact with liquid warmth. This is how I want to remember this night. Not the transgression of taking unauthorized time and resources, not the risk of discovery or disapproval, but this feeling of perfect presence, perfect integration of consciousness and sensation, perfect harmony between the self that experiences and the world that offers itself to be experienced. The water will cool eventually. Morning will come, bringing with it the return to routine and duty and the careful observation of boundaries. But this experience will remain, will become part of the interior landscape that no external circumstance can alter, will serve as proof that even in the most constrained circumstances, moments of pure freedom are possible for those patient enough to recognize and claim them. For now, though I float, I breathe, I let the heated water hold me like the night itself, suspended between waking and sleeping, between solitude and the social world that waits beyond these wooden walls, between the girl I was when I entered this bathhouse and whoever I will be when I finally emerge. The candle flame wavers in the small draught that seeps through the gaps in the wooden walls, casting dancing shadows across the silk spread before me on the low lacquered table. This kimono belongs to one of the guests from earlier in the evening, a man I glimpsed only briefly as he passed through the entrance hall, his figure elegant in dark hakama, his presence put commanding the kind of attention that makes even experienced geisha pause in their conversations. I should not be handling his discarded garment. This task belongs to the senior apprentices, those trusted with the intimate details of client care, those whose hands have earned the privilege of touching silk that costs more than my family's farm produced in an entire season. But the kimono was left in the small receiving room where I sought laundry, forgotten in the hurried transition from formal entertainment to whatever more private arrangements followed. And now it waits for someone to fold it properly, to treat it with the respect due to such exquisite craftsmanship. The silk whispers against itself as I lift one corner, the sound like secrets being shared between intimate friends. The fabric is impossibly light, seems to float rather than fall when I let it drape from my fingers. The pattern woven into the material tells a story I can barely read. Cranes in flight over stylized clouds, cherry blossoms scattered like snow against a background the color of deep water. Each motif is rendered in silk threads, so fine they seem almost imaginary, visible only when the candlelight catches them at precisely the right angle. I spread the kimono flat on the table, smoothing it with palms that have grown softer since coming to the okiya, skin that has learned to handle delicate things with appropriate care. The garment fills almost the entire surface of the small table, its sleeves extending like outstretched arms, its length requiring careful arrangement to prevent trailing on the tatami floor. In the flickering candlelight, the silk seems alive, breathing with each variation in the flame's intensity. The collar bears the faint scent of expensive cologne, something subtle and complex that speaks of bergamot and sandalwood, of ingredients imported from distant countries I can barely imagine. Beneath that artificial fragrance lies something warmer, more personal. The scent of the man who wore this garment, the particular combination of skin and hair and breath that makes each human being distinct from all others. I should not be noticing such intimate details. The proper response to handling a client's clothing is efficient. Impersonal care. Clean what needs cleaning. Fold what needs folding. Return everything to its designated place without commentary or curiosity. But alone in the candlelit room, with only the night sounds filtering through the walls, I find myself drawn into a different kind of attention, one that treats each element of the task as worthy of contemplation. The candlelight plays across the silk's surface, revealing subtleties of color and texture that electric lights would render flat and obvious. In this softer illumination, the blue of the background shifts between the deep blue of twilight sky and the darker blue of ocean depths, depending on how the fabric lies, how the light strikes it. The cherry blossoms seem to glow with their own pale radiance, while the cranes appear to move when shadows shift across their carefully rendered forms. I begin the folding process slowly, starting with the sleeves as I've been taught, bringing each wide expanse of silk into neat alignment with the body of the garment. The fabric resists creasing, its high quality evident in the way it wants to maintain its natural drape, rather than accepting the artificial geometry of storage. I work with this resistance rather than against it, allowing the silk to guide the process as much as I guide it. My fingers trace the edges of the sleeves as I fold them, feeling for the subtle raised texture where embroidery threads have been worked into the weave. The craftsmanship is extraordinary. Each crane feather is individually defined. Each petal of the scattered cherry blossoms has been given dimension and shadow. The work must have taken months, perhaps years, the kind of patient artistry that transforms simple fabric into something approaching poetry. I wonder about the hands that created this kimono, the women who sat for countless hours with silk threads and tiny needles, building up these complex images, stitch by infinitesimal stitch. Were they young like me, learning their craft in workshop spaces filled with other apprentices? Or were they master embroiderers, their eyes already dimmed by decades of close work, their fingers permanently curved from holding needles, their entire lives devoted to creating beauty for others to wear and admire? The candlelight flickers as a stronger draft moves through the room, and for a moment the cranes on the silk seem to flutter their wings. The cherry blossoms seem to tremble on their branches. The illusion lasts only a few seconds, but it reminds me of the particular magic that exists in handmade things. The way human intention and skill can create objects that seem to contain something beyond mere matter, something that responds to light and shadow and the quality of attention brought to viewing them. I continue folding, bringing the body of the kimono into the precise, geometric arrangement that maximizes storage efficiency while minimizing damage to the delicate fabric. This is a skill I've practiced with cotton yukata and common silk garments, but the principle remains the same regardless of the garment's value. Each fold must be clean and decisive, each crease placed where it will cause the least stress to the weave, each layer arranged to support rather than strain the layers above and below it. But working with silk of this quality transforms the familiar task into something more ceremonial, more mindful. Every movement must be slower, more deliberate, more aware of the potential for damage that comes with handling something irreplaceable. My breathing unconsciously adjusts to match the pace of the work, becoming deeper and more regular, creating a rhythm that seems to honor the care this garment deserves. The silk holds the candlelight differently as I fold it, the flat surfaces giving way to curved edges and overlapping layers that create new patterns of light and shadow. What was a two-dimensional image becomes three-dimensional sculpture. The painted cranes and flowers taking on depth and substance as the fabric shapes itself around my movements. This is another kind of artistry, I realize. The art of proper folding, the way careful arrangement can enhance rather than diminish the beauty of beautiful things. As I work, I find myself thinking about the man who wore this kimono earlier in the evening, trying to construct his character from the few details available to me. The expensive fabric suggests wealth, but not the flashy display of the nouveau rich. This is the kind of understated luxury that speaks of generations of prosperity, of families who have learned that true elegance whispers rather than shouts. The subtle cologne and the perfect fit of the garment suggests sophistication, familiarity with the finer things in life. But there are other clues embedded in the fabric itself. A small stain near, the hem barely visible but detectable by touch, suggests someone who lives fully in his expensive clothing rather than treating it as costume. A slight looseness in the shoulder area indicates a man who has lost weight recently, perhaps through illness or stress, or the natural changes that come with age. These imperfections humanize the garment, remind me that even the most elegant clothing serves ordinary human bodies with their ordinary vulnerabilities and needs. I smooth the silk with my palms as I work, feeling for any other signs of wear or damage that might require attention. The fabric seems to warm under my touch, or perhaps my hands are warming from the careful attention required by the task. Either way, the sensation creates an intimate, put connection between me and this object that has touched another person's skin, that has absorbed something of his presence, and now offers that presence to my exploring fingers. The thought makes me suddenly aware of my own body, of the fact that I am a young woman alone in a room at night, handling the clothing of a strange man, breathing the lingering traces of his scent. There is something transgressive about this intimacy, something that crosses boundaries even though the man himself is long gone, probably asleep, in his own home or in one of the private rooms upstairs where the senior geisha entertain their most valued clients. But the transgression feels innocent enough, more curiosity than desire, more appreciation for beauty than attraction to the person who wore it. I am discovering that there can be pleasure in handling beautiful things, even when those things belong to others, even when the handling is purely functional rather than possessive. The silk teaches my fingers about texture and temperature, about the way expensive materials respond to touch, about the particular satisfaction that comes from treating precious things with appropriate care. I reach the final stage of the folding process, bringing the long hem of the kimono up to meet the collar, creating the compact rectangle that will fit into the designated storage space. But I pause before making this final fold, reluctant to reduce the garment to mere storage efficiency, to hide away all the beauty that has been revealed in the candlelight. Instead, I let the silk rest in my hands for a moment longer, feeling its weight and texture, appreciating the way the embroidered cranes seem to nest in the valleys created by the previous folds. This is not my kimono, will never be my kimono, but for these few moments it exists entirely within my care, subject to my decisions about how it should be treated, how its beauty should be preserved and protected. The responsibility feels significant, almost sacred. Someone trusted this precious thing to the general care of the okiya, and by extension to my specific hands during this particular moment. The trust is impersonal. The man who wore it probably never considered who might handle it after he removed it, but trust nonetheless. The kind of faith in others' competence, put an integrity that makes civilized life possible. I complete the final fold with extra care, ensuring that the collar lies flat and smooth, that no part of the garment is stressed or strained by the compression required for storage. The finished package is surprisingly small, given the kimono's full size when spread open, a neat rectangle of dark silk that gives no hint of the complex beauty contained within its folds. But I know that beauty is there, waiting to unfold again when someone needs it, ready to transform its wearer from ordinary person into something more elegant, more refined, more connected to the long tradition of Japanese aesthetics that values subtlety over ostentation, quality over quantity, the kind of beauty that reveals itself slowly to careful observers, rather than announcing itself to casual glances. I set the folded kimono aside and reach for the next garment requiring attention, a woman's outer robe, left by one of the guests who accompanied the man in the silk kimono. This garment is equally expansive but different in character, its beauty more explicit, more immediately commanding. The base fabric is ivory silk, and over it has been painted a design of autumn maples in brilliant red and gold, their leaves scattered as if by wind across the pale surface. The painting technique is different from the embroidery of the man's kimono, broader strokes, more impressionistic, designed to be appreciated from a distance rather than examined closely. But the artistry is no less sophisticated. The way the painted leaves seem to drift across the fabric following some invisible current. The way the colors shift from deep read through orange to the palest yellow, mimicking the actual progression of autumn foliage. I spread this kimono on the table as I did the first, but the candlelight reveals it differently, where the embroidered silk seemed to absorb and hold the light, creating depth and shadow. This painted silk reflects it more directly. The metallic threads worked into the design, catching and throwing back the flame's flickering illumination. The effect is more dramatic, more theatrical. Exactly what one would expect from a garment designed to make its wearer the center of attention. This kimono carries different scents as well. A lighter perfume than the man's cologne. Something floral and feminine, but equally expensive, equally complex. Beneath that artificial fragrance lies the subtler scent of a woman's body. The particular combination of skin and hair oils, and the faint trace of face powder that clings to expensive clothing. These intimate traces make me think about the woman who wore this garment, about her life and circumstances, and the choices that brought her to this okiya on this particular evening. As I begin folding the woman's kimono, I find myself constructing a mental image of its owner. The size suggests someone taller than average, with the kind of figure that looks elegant in formal clothing rather than merely clothed. The cut and fit indicate someone familiar with the highest levels of fashion, someone whose wardrobe is curated rather than simply accumulated. The particular combination of sophistication and sensuality in the design suggests someone comfortable with being observed. Someone who understands the power that comes from wearing beautiful things beautifully. But again, there are humanizing details embedded in the fabric itself. A small repair near one sleeve, so expertly done as to be almost invisible, suggests someone who values beautiful things enough to maintain them properly rather than simply discarding them when they show wear. A slight fading along the hem indicates that this kimono has been worn often, enjoyed rather than preserved in untouched perfection. These signs of actual use make me appreciate the garment more rather than less. Beautiful things should be used, should fulfill their purpose of bringing beauty into the world through contact with living bodies and real occasions. A kimono that never left its storage box would be a tragedy of unused potential, like a musical instrument that was never played, or a garden that was never walked through. The candlelight continues to play across the painted maple leaves as I work, creating the illusion of movement that makes the static design seem alive with autumn wind. I find myself moving more slowly than efficiency requires, partly to avoid damaging the delicate fabric, but partly to extend this opportunity to work with something so beautiful, to participate in the care and preservation of objects that represent the highest achievements of human craftsmanship. The folding process becomes a form of meditation, each movement deliberate and mindful, each decision about placement and pressure made with full attention to its consequences. My breathing synchronizes with the rhythm of the work, creating a kind of internal quiet that allows me to be fully present with the task, fully aware of the silk's texture under my fingers, the candle's warmth on my face, the way the painted leaves seem to shift and dance in the flickering light. I think about the relationship between beauty and ownership, about how these magnificent garments belong to people who probably own dozens of equally beautiful things, people for whom such luxury has become routine rather than miraculous. Do they still see the artistry in their clothing? Still appreciate the thousands of hours of skilled labor that went into creating each embroidered crane, each painted leaf? Or does familiarity dull appreciation, making the extraordinary seem ordinary through constant exposure. The question makes me grateful for my position as occasional handler rather than owner of such things. My appreciation remains fresh, untainted by possessiveness or the anxiety that comes with being responsible for preserving valuable objects. I can enjoy the beauty without worrying about insurance or storage or the dozen other practical concerns that accompany ownership of precious things. As I near completion of the second folding, I realize that this stolen time in the candlelit room has become something more than simple task completion. It has become a kind of communion with beauty, a conversation between my hands and these exquisite objects that speak of worlds I may never fully inhabit, but can appreciate from my particular vantage point as temporary caretaker. The woman's kimono folds differently than the man's, its painted surface creating different patterns of texture and reflection as the layers accumulate. Where the embroidered silk created depth through raised threads and complex weaving, this painted silk creates drama through color and the way metallic accents catch and throw back the candlelight. Both are beautiful, but they speak different aesthetic languages, represent different approaches to the transformation of simple fabric into art. I complete the folding and set the woman's kimono beside the man's. Two neat packages that give no external indication of the treasures contained within their compressed folds. But having handled both garments, having felt their weight and texture and absorbed something of their individual characters, I carry the knowledge of their hidden beauty like a secret, like evidence of wonders that exist in the world even when no one is looking. The candle has burned lower during my work, its flame smaller but steadier now that it has found its stable rhythm. The wax has melted into interesting formations around the base, creating small sculptures that will exist only until someone cleans the holder, only until the evidence of this particular night's burning is removed to make way for fresh candles and new patterns of melted wax. I reach for the third garment in the basket, another men's kimono, but this one clearly of different provenance than the first. The silk is good quality, but not extraordinary. The pattern more conventional. Stylized waves in blue and white. A design that speaks of traditional tastes rather than cutting-edge fashion. The scent that clings to the fabric is simpler too, less complex than the expensive cologne of the earlier garment, more direct and honest in its masculinity. This kimono tells a different story as I spread it on the table for folding. The man who wore it is probably younger than the owner of the embroidered silk, less established in whatever profession or family business provides his income. The fit is perfect, suggesting careful attention to appearance, even if not unlimited resources for acquiring the finest materials. There's something appealing about this combination of aspiration and restraint, about someone who understands the importance of dressing well, but must choose quality over quantity, must make each purchase count. The wave pattern is rendered in traditional techniques, indigo dye creating the deep blue background, while resist dyeing has preserved the white foam and spray of the breaking waves. This is not innovative artistry, but masterful execution of time-tested designs. the kind of conservative elegance that never goes out of style, because it never attempted to be particularly fashionable in the first place. I find myself wondering about the occasion that brought together the wearers of these three different garments. The man in expensive embroidered silk, the woman in painted autumn maples, this younger man in traditional waves. What kind of gathering required such formal dress? What business or pleasure or social obligation drew them to this okiya on this particular evening? The thought reminds me that these beautiful objects exist not as museum pieces, but as elements in human stories, as costumes in the ongoing drama of social interaction and personal ambition, and the complex dance of attraction and power that governs so much of adult life. The garments I'm folding are evidence of lives lived at a level of sophistication I can observe but not yet fully understand. Lives where clothing serves as communication, where aesthetic choices carry social and economic significance beyond mere personal preference. As I work with the wave-patterned kimono, I notice that my folding technique has become more confident, more automatic. My hands have learned the proper proportions and pressures, have developed muscle, memory for the sequence of folds that transforms flat fabric into neat storage packages. But this growing competence allows me to pay more attention to the aesthetic aspects of the work, to appreciate the way each fold reveals new relationships between the different elements of the design. The wave pattern seems particularly suited to folding, the flowing lines of the design following the curves created by the fabric's compression. Unlike geometric patterns that can be disrupted by arbitrary creases, these organic shapes adapt to whatever configuration the folding process requires, maintaining their essential character even as their specific arrangement changes. The candle flickers again, sending shadows dancing across the silk. In this unstable light, the painted waves seem to move like real water, the blue and white pattern shifting and flowing in response to the flame's variations. For a moment I imagine I can hear the sound of surf, can feel the salt spray of ocean waves breaking against rocky shores. The illusion passes quickly, but it reminds me of the power that visual art can have when viewed under the right conditions, in the right frame of mind. I complete the folding of the wave kimono and add it to the growing collection of neat packages beside the candle. 3 different approaches to masculine elegance. 3 different stories embedded in silk and craftsmanship. 3 different relationships to beauty and status and the social codes that govern formal dress. Together they represent a small cross-section of the world that exists beyond the okiya walls. The world of wealthy clients and elaborate entertainments that supports the existence of places like this. But they also represent something more personal, the particular kind of intimacy that comes from handling other people's clothing, from touching fabric that has touched skin, from participating in the care of objects that carry traces of their owner's presence. This intimacy is innocent but real, a connection that transcends the social distances that normally separate people from different classes and circumstances. The 4th garment in the basket is different again. A Hari jacket in dark purple silk, its surface covered with a pattern of silver moths that seem to float like spirits against the deep background color. This is clearly a woman's garment, but the design is more subtle than the painted maple leaves, more mysterious in its beauty. The moths are rendered in silver thread that catches the candlelight and throws it back in sudden flashes, creating the impression of movement even when the fabric lies completely still. I lift the haori carefully, feeling its lighter weight compared to the full kimono I've been handling. This is an outer garment, designed to be worn over other clothing rather than next to the skin, and its construction reflects that function. The silk is slightly heavier, more structured, able to maintain its shape without the support of an obi or the weight of underlayers. The silver moths are extraordinary in their detail and execution. Each wing is individually defined with threads of slightly different metallic content, creating variations in how they reflect light. Some shine with pure silver brightness, while others have a more muted, pewter-like finish. The effect is subtle but sophisticated, the kind of design that reveals new details each time it's examined closely. As I spread the haori on the table for folding, I notice that several of the moths seem to have tiny seed pearls sewn at their centers, representing the creatures' bodies with an accuracy that goes beyond mere decoration into the realm of naturalistic representation. Someone spent considerable time studying actual moths to achieve this level of detail, translating the specific anatomy of insects into silk thread and metallic embroidery. The craftsmanship makes me think about the relationship between art and observation, about how the most beautiful human creations often arise from careful attention to the natural world. These embroidered moths are lovely as abstract decoration, but they gain additional power from their accuracy, from the way they honor the actual beauty of living creatures, rather than simply using them as convenient motifs. The scent clinging to this garment is different from the others, more complex, layered, suggesting someone who takes perfume seriously as an aspect of personal presentation. I detect jasmine and sandalwood, but also subtler notes that I cannot identify, the ingredients that suggest knowledge of perfumery techniques and access to rare materials. This is not simply expensive fragrance, but educated fragrance, chosen by someone who understands scent as an art form rather than mere pleasant decoration. Folding the haori requires a different technique than the kimono, its shorter length and different proportions demanding adjustments to the standard process. But the principles remain the same. Careful attention to the fabric's natural behavior, respect for the delicate embroidery, awareness of how compression affects both structure and ornamentation. I work slowly, methodically, allowing the silver moths to settle into their folded configurations without straining the threads that hold them to the purple silk. The candle is definitely lower now, its flame smaller, but creating a more intimate pool of light around the table. The room beyond the candlelight has grown darker, more mysterious, creating the sense that this small circle of illumination contains the entire world, or at least the only part of the world that matters at this moment. The effect is dreamlike, hypnotic, conducive to the kind of meditative attention that transforms routine tasks into opportunities for deeper awareness. I think about the woman who wore this haori, trying to construct her character from the evidence available in the fabric and scent. And craftsmanship, someone with sophisticated taste, but also playful sensibility. The choice to cover a garment with moths suggests someone who finds beauty in creatures that others might consider unremarkable or even troublesome. Someone confident enough to wear something so distinctive, so likely to provoke comment and curiosity. The moths themselves seem significant beyond their decorative function. In many cultures, moths represent transformation, the soul's journey from darkness toward light, the dangerous attraction of beauty that can be admired but not safely possessed. Was the choice of this particular creature conscious symbolism, or simply aesthetic preference for their delicate forms and the way their wings catch light? I complete the folding of the haori and add it to the collection of packaged garments. 4 different approaches to elegance now, for different relationships to beauty and craft, and the social purposes that formal clothing serves. Together they create a small archive of contemporary taste, a sampling of how people with means and sophistication choose to present themselves when they venture into spaces like this okiya. The final garment in the basket is the most intriguing. A man's under-kimono in white silk, so fine it seems almost transparent in the candlelight. This is the most intimate piece of clothing I've handled tonight. The layer that lies directly against skin, that absorbs the most personal traces of its wearer's presence. The silk is undecorated except for a small family crest embroidered in white thread near the collar, so subtle as to be nearly invisible unless examined closely. This garment speaks of a different kind of luxury than the elaborately decorated outer layers, the luxury of perfect materials and construction. Rather than obvious display, the confidence that comes from knowing that even unseen elements of one's dress are of the highest quality. This is understatement, elevated to an art form, elegance that whispers so quietly it can barely be heard. The white silk feels different under my fingers than the colored and patterned fabrics I've been handling. There's something pure about it, clean and essential, like the difference between clear water and water that has been flavored or colored. The absence of decoration focuses attention on the material itself, on the way light passes through the fine weave, on the subtle texture that comes from silk of extraordinary quality. I spread the under-kimono on the table with extra care, aware that white silk shows every mark, every imperfection, every trace of handling. The candlelight makes the fabric seem to glow from within, as if it were woven from moonbeams rather than silkworm cocoons. The family crest, nearly invisible in daylight, catches the flame's illumination and reveals itself as a stylized crane, wings spread in flight. The crane motif connects this garment to the first kimono I folded, suggesting perhaps that they belonged to the same man. The elaborate outer layer for public display, this simple underlayer for personal comfort, and the private satisfaction of wearing something perfect against his skin. The connection creates a more complete picture of the wearer, someone who appreciates beauty in both its public and private forms. who understands that true elegance extends to details that others will never see. The scent embedded in this white silk is the most personal, yet not cologne or deliberate fragrance, but the natural scent of clean human skin, the particular combination of elements that makes each person's smell distinctive. This is as intimate as handling another person's clothing can be. Touching fabric that has absorbed the most essential traces of someone's physical presence. I fold the underkimono with the reverence it deserves, treating it as the most precious item in the entire collection despite its lack of obvious ornamentation. Sometimes the most valuable things are the most subtle, the most difficult to appreciate without educated attention. This garment represents the pinnacle of the textile arts, not through decoration, but through perfection of basic elements, the quality of the silk, the precision of the weaving, the skill of the construction. As I complete the final fold, I realize that the entire process has taken much longer than it should have, that I've been lingering over each garment far beyond the time required for simple completion of the task. But the extra time has been well spent, has given me insights into beauty and craftsmanship and the social world that these beautiful objects represent. The 5 folded garments sit beside the candle like a collection of secrets, each one containing hidden wonders that will remain invisible until someone chooses to unfold them again, to release the beauty compressed within their neat packages. I know now what each package contains, know the specific character and quality of each hidden treasure, and that knowledge feels valuable in itself. The candle has burned low enough that I should probably extinguish it soon, should gather the folded garments and return them to their proper storage places, should prepare for the few hours of sleep that remain before morning duties begin. But I am reluctant to end this session of intimate attention to beautiful things, this opportunity to participate in the care and preservation of objects that represent human creativity at its finest. I lean back in my sitting position and look at the collection of folded silk, illuminated by the small but steady candle flame. Each garment tells its own story, represents its own approach to the transformation of functional necessity into aesthetic pleasure. Together they create a small museum of contemporary elegance, a testament to the continuing vitality of traditional crafts in an era of increasing mechanization and mass production. The work has left my hands soft from contact with fine silk, has trained my eyes to see subtle distinctions in quality and craftsmanship, has educated my sense of touch to appreciate differences in texture and weight that I might never have noticed without this concentrated attention. These are skills that will serve me well as I advance in my training, as I learn to handle the beautiful objects that surround the lives of geisha and their clients. But beyond practical education, the evening has provided something more valuable, a deeper appreciation for the role that beautiful objects play in human life, for the way that carefully made things can elevate ordinary activities into opportunities for aesthetic experience. Folding laundry becomes communion with artistry. Handling clothing becomes participation in the preservation of cultural traditions. The candle flame wavers again, sending final shadows dancing across the silk packages. Soon I will have to end this private exhibition. Will have to return these treasures to their storage spaces and prepare for sleep. But the images will remain. The embroidered cranes seeming to move in flickering light, the painted maple leaves drifting across ivory silk, the silver moths floating against purple darkness. These memories will become part of my internal collection of beautiful things, images that I can summon when daily routine becomes tedious, when the constraints of apprentice life feel particularly confining. They will remind me that beauty exists in the world, that human skill and creativity continue to produce objects worthy of wonder and reverence, that even in the most mundane circumstances there are opportunities for aesthetic appreciation if one knows how to look, how to pay attention, how to treat ordinary moments as potential encounters with the extraordinary. I reach forward and gently blow out the candle, watching the small flame disappear into darkness, watching the thin trail of smoke rise toward the ceiling like incense offered to invisible deities. The room disappears into shadow, but my hands still know where each folded garment lies, still carry the sensory memory of silk against skin, still remember the particular weight and texture of each beautiful thing I've had the privilege to handle in the intimate light of a single candle burning through the deep hours of a Nagasaki night. Someone sighs on the other side of the wall, a sound so soft I might have imagined it if I weren't lying here in the darkness. My body finally horizontal after the long evening of sitting and listening and the careful work of folding silk by candlelight. The sound comes through the paper screens that separate my small sleeping space from the corridor, then filters through whatever walls lie beyond that corridor, carrying with it the weight of exhaustion or satisfaction or something more complex that I cannot name. I press my ear closer to the wooden post that forms the frame of my sleeping alcove, trying to determine the direction and distance of the sound. The okiya has grown quieter than I've ever heard it. Even the usual, settling sounds of wood and paper muffled by the deep stillness that comes only in the hours before dawn. But beneath that surface quiet, there are other sounds, more intimate sounds, the evidence of lives being lived in private spaces throughout the building. The sigh comes again, definitely from a room above and to my left, probably one of the chambers where the senior geisha entertain their most valued clients. A woman's voice, I think, though the sound is so breathy and wordless that gender seems almost irrelevant, reduced to the essential human expression of breath, leaving the body with some burden of emotion attached to it. I settle back onto my thin mattress, pulling the cotton quilt up to my chin, and feeling the familiar comfort of being horizontal after hours of careful posture and controlled movements. My body releases itself into the tatami beneath the mattress, muscles finally allowed to abandon the precise alignments required for proper sitting, proper kneeling, proper attention to the endless details that fill an apprentice's days. But even as my body relaxes, my mind remains alert, tuned to the subtle symphony of sounds that the house produces when most of its inhabitants believe themselves unobserved. Water running briefly through pipes somewhere in the upper floors. The soft thud of a shoshi screen sliding closed. Footsteps crossing a room with the particular care that comes from trying not to wake someone else. Or perhaps from trying not to disturb whatever delicate atmosphere has been established between two people in a private space. The quilt smells faintly of cypress wood and the particular blend of incense that permeates everything in the okiya, but also of my own body, the accumulated sense of a young woman who has spent the day working by and watching and absorbing the complex sensory environment of a house devoted to beauty and entertainment. When I breathe deeply, I can detect traces of the camellia oil we use for hairs, the soap we make from rice bran, the green smell of tatami mats, and the warmer smell of wood aged by years of human habitation. Another sound drifts through the walls, more distinct this time. The low murmur of conversation, words too muffled by distance and intervening barriers to be understood, but carrying the rhythm and tone of intimate communication. A man's voice alternating with a woman's. The cadence suggesting not the formal patterns of business discussion, but something more personal, more spontaneous, more connected to immediate feeling than to social protocol. I close my eyes and let these sounds wash over me, trying not to interpret them too specifically, but simply to absorb them as part of the larger acoustic environment that surrounds my attempts at sleep. The okiya at night becomes a different place than it is during the day, more mysterious, more charged with possibilities that daylight disciplines into proper channels. These late-night sounds speak of the adult world that I'm being prepared to enter, the world of desires and satisfactions that exists parallel to part, separate from the world of training and discipline and careful observation. My hands rest on my stomach beneath the quilt, and I can feel my own breathing, the rise and fall of my ribs, the soft expansion and contraction of my belly as air moves in and out of my lungs. This is the most basic rhythm of life, the pattern that connects me to every other breathing creature in the house, from the mice in the walls to the cats that hunt them, to the humans engaged in whatever private activities are generating the sounds that filter through the darkness. The memory of the silk kimonos I folded earlier returns unbidden, my hands remembering the texture of expensive fabric, the weight of garments that cost more than most people earn in a year. But those beautiful objects seem less important now than they did in the candlelight, reduced by darkness and fatigue to mere cloth, valuable but not essential, ornamental rather than fundamental to the business of being human. What seems more important now is this simple fact of breathing, of lying in comfortable darkness while my body processes the day's experiences and prepares for whatever tomorrow will bring. The silk kimonos will be there in the morning, properly folded and stored, ready to be worn again for other occasions, other performances of elegance and refinement. But this particular night, this specific configuration of sounds and sensations and half-formed thoughts will never return once it passes into memory. A floorboard creaks somewhere above me. the wood adjusting to changes, in weight distribution as someone moves across a room or settles into a different position. The sound is followed by a faint rustling that might be bedclothes being rearranged, or clothing being adjusted, or simply the natural sounds that accompany human movement in close quarters. These domestic noises create their own kind of intimacy, the awareness of other people existing in their private spaces, living their separate but connected lives within the same wooden structure. Can't think about the woman who sighed, trying to imagine her circumstances without venturing too far into specific scenarios. That would be inappropriate for me to contemplate. But I can allow myself to wonder about the general texture of her experience, whether she is tired or exhilarated, whether the sigh expressed satisfaction or longing, whether she is alone now or in the company of someone whose presence requires the kind of careful attention that makes natural breathing temporarily conscious rather than automatic. The quilt has warmed to my body temperature, creating a small microclimate of comfort that makes me reluctant to move even slightly less. I disturb the perfect balance of warmth and weight that has been achieved through stillness and patience. This is one of the small luxuries available even to apprentices, the nightly opportunity to be completely horizontal, completely relaxed, completely private within the boundaries of personal bedding and individual space. During the day, privacy is a scarce commodity in the okiya. My movements constantly observed and evaluated, my posture and expression subject to correction and instruction. But here in the darkness, covered by cotton quilt and separated from others by paper screens and wooden posts, I can let my face relax into whatever expression comes naturally, can let my body find its own preferred arrangement of limbs and curves, can breathe without considering how that breathing appears to supervisors and instructors. The conversation in the upper room has grown quieter, more intermittent. The long pauses between words, suggesting either the comfortable silence of established intimacy or the charged quiet that precedes more intense forms of communication. I find myself holding my own breath during these pauses, unconsciously trying to make myself more receptive to whatever sounds might emerge from the silence. But the effort defeats itself. The more consciously I listen, the less I seem able to hear, as if attention itself creates static that interferes with reception. When I relax and let my awareness become more diffuse, more open to whatever the night offers, rather than focused on specific sounds from specific directions, the acoustic environment of the house reveals more of itself, becomes more vivid and complete. I can hear my own heartbeat now, the soft pulse that usually remains below the threshold of consciousness, unless I'm frightened or excited or have been running. The sound seems louder in the darkness, more present, as if the absence of visual input has made my ears more sensitive to internal as well as external sounds. Each beat reminds me of the blood moving through my body, the complex circulation that keeps every cell alive and functioning, the mysterious process that continues automatically whether I'm awake or asleep, conscious or unconscious. The rhythm of my heartbeat synchronizes oddly with the rhythm of my breathing. creating a complex internal music that seems to echo or respond to the external sounds of the house settling around me. This is meditation without intention, the kind of natural mindfulness that emerges when conditions are right for letting go of directed thought, for allowing consciousness to rest in simple awareness of present moment experience. A new sound enters the acoustic landscape, the distant whistle of wind through the eaves of the building, carrying with it the promise of weather, of the larger world beyond the okiya walls, where seasons change and storms gather, and the great processes of nature continue regardless of human plans and purposes. The wind reminds me that this building is a small pocket of human order carved out of a larger natural world, that the warmth and dryness and safety I take for granted are achieved through constant maintenance, constant attention to the boundaries between inside and outside. I pull the quilt closer around my shoulders, grateful for the simple comfort of woven cotton and human craftsmanship, for the accumulated wisdom that has learned to create shelter and warmth, and the conditions necessary for rest and recovery. These are not small achievements, these basic elements of civilized life, even though they're so familiar that they usually pass unnoticed, taken for granted as natural rather than recognizing them as the products of generations of human ingenuity and effort. The wind rises slightly, moving through the garden outside, rustling the leaves of trees whose names I'm still learning, carrying scents and sounds from the harbor, from the hills beyond the city, from all the places where other people are also lying in darkness, also listening to the night sounds, also suspended between the day that has ended and the day that will begin when the sun returns. This sense of connection to the larger human community feels comforting rather than overwhelming, a reminder that whatever particular circumstances define my life, I share the basic experiences of embodiment and breathing and the need for rest with people everywhere, regardless of their social position or economic circumstances, or the specific cultural forms that shape their daily routines. The conversation upstairs has ended, or at least become so quiet that it no longer penetrates the barriers between rooms. In its place comes a different kind of sound, rhythmic, regular, intimate in a way that makes me suddenly self-conscious about my own listening. I press my face into the mattress, trying to give the people above me the privacy they deserve, trying to respect boundaries that may already have been crossed by the simple fact of being present in a building where walls are thin and sounds carry farther than their makers might realize. But the sounds stop almost as soon as I've noticed them, replaced by the deeper quiet that suggests sleep, or at least the kind of stillness that comes after physical exertion, after the expenditure of energy that leaves the body satisfied and ready for rest. The house seems to exhale collectively, settling into the profound peace that comes in the hours before dawn, when even the most restless inhabitants have found whatever satisfaction or exhaustion they need to let consciousness dissolve into sleep. I allow my own breathing to slow and deepen, following the house's example, letting my body sink more completely into the mattress and tatami beneath it. My hands relax their grip on the quilt, fingers uncurling from the unconscious fists that seem to form during wakeful attention, arms settling into positions that require no muscular effort to maintain. This is the beginning of the surrender to sleep, the gradual abandonment of conscious control over body and mind, the trust that whatever dreams or rest come will be sufficient to prepare me for another day of learning and watching, and careful attention to the details that fill an apprentice's life. But before sleep claims me completely, I want to hold on to this moment of perfect horizontal comfort, this sense of being held by the house and the night and the larger rhythms that govern rest and waking. The quilt rises and falls with my breathing, creating its own small weather system of warmth and movement. Beneath the cotton, my body continues its automatic processes, digestion and circulation, and the mysterious pure cellular repairs that happen during sleep, the maintenance work that keeps the complex organism of flesh and bone functioning smoothly enough to support consciousness and sensation, and the capacity for learning new things. I think about the hands that wove this quilt, the cotton plants that grew in distant fields, the long chain of human labor and natural process that brought these simple materials together into the specific configuration that now provides my comfort. Even the most basic elements of daily life connect us to vast networks of interdependence, to the labor of others and the bounty of natural systems, and the accumulated knowledge that has learned to transform raw materials into useful objects. The gratitude I feel is not abstract but physical, embodied in the actual sensation of warmth and comfort, in the real experience of being supported and protected by human craftsmanship and natural materials working together. This seems like the most fundamental form of appreciation, not intellectual recognition of dependence, but visceral awareness of how much my comfort depends on forces and processes and people beyond my direct control or understanding. A cat calls somewhere in the garden, its voice carrying a complex message of territory and desire, and the particular loneliness that seems to affect all creatures during the deepest hours of night. The sound reminds me that other forms of consciousness are also navigating the darkness, also seeking whatever satisfaction or comfort the night offers, also subject to by the biological rhythms that govern sleep and waking, rest and activity. The cat's call is answered by another, more distant voice, and I imagine the conversation that follows, conducted in tones and patterns that carry meaning I can sense but not translate. This is another language entirely, another way of organizing experience and communication, another approach to the basic problems of existence that all living creatures must solve in their own particular ways. The animal voices fade back into the larger quiet, but their brief exchange has reminded me of the world beyond human concerns, the realm of instinct and immediate response to physical need, the simpler but no less complex life that continues around and beneath and through the elaborate structures of civilization. This parallel existence seems more visible at night when human activity diminishes and other forms of life claim temporary dominance over the shared spaces of Earth. and air and water. My breathing has become deeper and more regular without conscious intention. My body beginning the automatic preparation for sleep that happens when conditions are right for letting go of wakefulness. The boundaries between conscious thought and drifting association are beginning to blur. Ideas and images arising and dissolving without the logical connections that characterize daytime thinking. I see again the embroidered cranes from the silk kimono, but now they seem to move with real flight rather than simply creating the illusion of movement through artistic technique. They rise from the folded fabric and circle the room, their wings catching light that has no visible source, their forms becoming more and more transparent until they dissolve into the darkness above my resting place. The image feels significant without being interpretable, meaningful in the way that dreams are meaningful, through association and symbol rather than through logical argument or narrative sequence. Perhaps the cranes represent transformation, the soul's capacity to rise above material circumstances through beauty and imagination. Or perhaps they simply represent the way consciousness itself can soar even when the body is constrained by social position and physical limitation. But analysis dissolves the image rather than illuminating it, and I let the cranes fade back into whatever realm produces such visions, content to have experienced their brief flight without needing to understand their significance. This willingness to let mystery remain mysterious seems like another skill worth cultivating, another form of wisdom that comes from accepting rather than always trying to control or comprehend. The house has achieved its deepest quiet now, the silence broken only by the soft sounds of natural processes, wood expanding and contracting with temperature changes, the movement of small creatures in hidden spaces, the whisper of air currents through gaps and joints, and the tiny openings that no amount of careful construction can completely eliminate. These sounds are comforting rather than disturbing, evidence of the house's aliveness, its participation in the larger dance of matter and energy that includes my own breathing body, the sleeping bodies in other rooms, by the growing plants in the garden, the distant ocean with its tides and currents, and the complex life that fills its depths. I am part of this larger system now, no longer a separate consciousness observing from outside, but an integrated element in the house's nighttime ecology, my breathing contributing to the circulation of air and moisture, my warmth adding to the total heat budget that keeps the building comfortable, my presence completing whatever pattern of occupancy gives the okiya its specific character and atmosphere. This sense of integration extends beyond the building to include the neighborhood, the city, the island nation that contains this particular collection of wooden structures and paper screens and human lives. I am one among millions of people settling into sleep at this hour, all of us, trusting that the night will pass safely, that morning will bring opportunities for continued learning and growth, and the satisfaction of contributing something useful to the larger human community. The thought is both humbling and reassuring. Humbling, because it puts my individual concerns into perspective as tiny elements in vast patterns of collective life, reassuring because it confirms my membership in something larger and more enduring than personal circumstance. Whatever happens to me specifically, the larger pattern will continue, will absorb my contributions and continue evolving in directions I can influence but not control. My hands have found their way to my heart, palms resting gently on my chest so I can feel the steady rhythm that will continue throughout the night, throughout whatever dreams may come, throughout the years of life that stretch ahead with their promise of continued learning and deepening understanding of what it means to be human in this particular time and place. The heartbeat seems to echo something larger, the pulse of the house around me, the rhythm of the city beyond the house, the great tidal breathing of the earth itself as it turns through space, carrying all of us on its patient journey around the sun. These nested rhythms create a sense of being held, of participating in patterns that extend far beyond individual consciousness, while still including and supporting that consciousness as an essential element. Sleep begins to claim the edges of awareness, thought becoming more fluid, more associative, less bound by the logical structures that govern waking consciousness. But before I surrender completely to whatever dreams await, I want to acknowledge the gift of this particular night, the opportunity to fold silk by candlelight, to bathe in solitude and warmth, to lie here in comfort while listening to the intimate sounds of a house full of people living their various lives in the private spaces that civilization provides for rest and reflection and the renewal that makes continued effort possible. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges and opportunities, its own requirements for attention and effort, and the careful navigation of social relationships and professional obligations. But tonight belongs to rest, to the mysterious processes that happen during sleep, to the trust that consciousness can safely dissolve into darkness and return refreshed, ready for whatever the next day offers. The quilt settles more closely around my relaxing body, and I close my eyes, letting the last traces of deliberate thought dissolve into the vast quiet that surrounds and supports all conscious life. The house breathes around me, the night breathes through the house, and I breathe with both of them, part of the great circulation of air and awareness that connects all living things in the patient dance of existence, rest and renewal, that continues whether we're awake to witness it or lost in dreams. We'll only half remember when morning finally returns to wake us into another day of being alive in this beautiful and complex world. The last candle burns low in the hallway outside my sleeping alcove, its flame reduced to a small blue flicker that dances on the edge of extinction, but refuses to surrender entirely to the darkness. I watch it through the gap at the bottom of my paper screen, mesmerized by its stubborn persistence, its determination to continue providing light even as the wick disappears into the pool of melted wax that has accumulated throughout the long night. The house has settled into its deepest rest now, the silence so complete that I can hear the subtle sounds usually masked by human activity, the soft tick of wood contracting as temperatures drop toward dawn, the whisper of air moving through hidden passages between walls, the distant sound of water moving through pipes as the building's circulatory systems continue, their patient work of maintaining comfort and cleanliness. My body has found its preferred position for sleep, curled on my side with my knees drawn up slightly, one arm tucked beneath my head and the other resting on the cotton quilt that covers me like a gentle weight, holding warmth close to my skin while allowing enough circulation of air to prevent the stifling heat that makes sleep restless and dream-troubled. The thin mattress beneath me has molded itself to the curves of my body over the months I've been sleeping here, creating a perfect impression that welcomes me each night, that knows the specific arrangement of hip and shoulder and rib cage that defines my particular form. This is one of the small intimacies that develop between body and environment over time, the way familiar objects learn to accommodate our needs, while we learn to appreciate their particular gifts of comfort and support. The tatami mat under the mattress breathes with faint sounds as my weight shifts slightly, the woven reeds adjusting to minute changes in pressure and position. This natural material has its own life, its own response to humidity and temperature, its own subtle fragrance that mingles with the sense of cotton bedding and wooden walls to create the distinctive atmosphere of this small private space that has become more home to me than anywhere else I've ever slept. Through the paper screens that separate my alcove from the corridor, I can sense the deeper darkness that fills the rest of the house, now that even the hallway candle has begun its final descent toward extinction. But this darkness feels protective rather than threatening, like being held in the gentle embrace of night itself, surrounded by the accumulated warmth and presence of all the people who share this wooden structure, all of us breathing together in the synchronized rhythm that connects, sleeping bodies across the barriers of walls and social position. I draw the quilt higher, pulling it up to my chin, so that only my face remains exposed to the cool air that seeps through the gaps in the building's construction. The cotton has absorbed my body heat throughout the night, becoming a reservoir of warmth that radiates comfort back to my skin, creating the perfect microclimate for the deep rest that will prepare me for another day of learning and observation and careful attention to the details that fill an apprentice's life. My hair spreads across the small pillow like dark water, still carrying traces of the camellia oil we use for conditioning, still holding the memory of this evening's careful brushing that removed the tangles and debris accumulated during the day's work. The familiar weight of it against my neck and shoulders creates another layer of comfort, another element in the complex sensory environment that supports deep relaxation and the gradual surrender of consciousness to sleep. But before that surrender becomes complete, I want to hold onto this particular moment, this specific configuration of sensation and thought that will never exist again once sleep transforms it into memory or dream. The house around me continues its patient work of shelter and protection, its wooden bones creaking softly as they adjust to the night's cooling temperatures, its paper skin breathing gently as air pressures equalize between inside and outside. I think about all the people who have slept in this room before me, all the young women who have lain on this same tatami beneath similar quilts, listening to similar sounds of a house settling into rest. Their dreams have dissolved into whatever realm claims forgotten experiences, but something of their presence remains in the worn smoothness of the wooden posts, the particular give of the tatami beneath the mattress, the way the space itself seems to understand the needs of a tired body seeking restoration. This continuity across time feels comforting rather than haunting, a reminder that I am part of a long tradition of women learning the skills and attitudes that will eventually transform them from observers into participants, from apprentices into practitioners of arts that serve beauty and pleasure and the complex social needs that formal entertainment addresses. Each of us has contributed something to the accumulated wisdom of this place, and each has taken something away that will influence how we understand and practice what we've learned. The thought of my eventual graduation from apprentice status brings with it a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. Excitement about the freedoms and responsibilities that will come with full training, and uncertainty about whether I'll prove capable of meeting the exacting standards that the profession demands. But those concerns belong to daylight hours, to the times when planning and preparation occupy consciousness. Tonight they seem distant, less urgent, softened by the darkness and the immediate comfort of horizontal rest. I shift slightly in the bedding, feeling the quilt adjust around my body, feeling the mattress respond to the new distribution of weight. These small movements remind me of the pleasure of embodiment, of inhabiting a physical form that can experience comfort and warmth, and the specific satisfaction that comes from finding the perfect position for rest. My body has served me well today. Gu has carried me through the various tasks and observations that filled the hours between waking and this moment of settling toward sleep. The memory of the hot bath returns unbidden, my skin remembering the sensation of heated water, the particular luxury of solitude and steaming warmth, the way the cedar tub seemed to embrace my floating body, while the night air moved across whatever surfaces remained exposed. That experience feels like a gift now, a perfect interlude of sensory pleasure that proved possible even within the constraints of apprentice life, even when stolen from time that officially belonged to sleep or other prescribed activities. But the bath was hours ago, and its immediate sensations have been replaced by this different kind of comfort, drier, more stable, more oriented toward rest than toward the awakening of sensation. Both have their place in the rhythm of daily life. Both serve the body's need for different kinds of attention and care. The variety keeps experience fresh, prevents any single form of pleasure from becoming routine or taken for granted. The candle in the hallway gutters more dramatically now, the flame leaping higher for a moment before settling back to its steady diminishment. Soon it will die entirely, and the house will be left to the natural darkness that precedes dawn, the deep quiet that allows dreams to emerge from whatever hidden sources feed the sleeping mind. I find myself grateful for the light it has provided throughout this long night, the warm glow that has marked the boundaries of safe space, that has made the darkness feel friendly rather than threatening. when the candle finally expires, I know I will sleep more deeply, will surrender more completely to whatever dreams await. The small amount of light that remains serves as a tenuous connection to waking consciousness. By a reminder that I could open my eyes and see something if necessary. Once that connection is severed, sleep will claim me entirely, will carry me into the interior landscapes that exist only in the sleeping mind. But for now, while the flame still dances, I can enjoy this threshold state, this suspension between waking and sleeping that allows for a different kind of awareness, more fluid than daytime consciousness, but more directed than dream. In this state, memories and sensations and half-formed thoughts move through awareness like clouds across a night sky, visible but constantly changing, meaningful but not requiring analysis or response. I remember the silk kimonos I folded by candlelight, the way expensive fabric felt under my fingertips, the intricate patterns that spoke of skilled hands and patient artistry, and the social world that values such things highly enough to pay for their creation. But the memory is softer now, less concerned with the specific details of craftsmanship than with the general fact of beauty existing in the world, of human creativity continuing to produce objects worthy of wonder and appreciation. The embroidered cranes seem to move again behind my closed eyelids, their wings catching light that exists only in memory and imagination, their flight-tracing patterns that connect the folded silk to the living birds they represent, to the vast migrations that carry actual cranes across oceans and continents in response to seasonal changes and biological imperatives that transcend human purposes while somehow still speaking to human longing for transformation and transcendence. This movement between specific memory and general meaning feels natural in the drowsy state that precedes sleep, consciousness becoming less rigid, more willing to find connections that logical thinking might reject as merely fanciful. But perhaps those connections reveal truths that logic overlooks, patterns that become visible only when the analytical mind relaxes its control over perception and interpretation. The house continues to breathe around me, its rhythm steady and reassuring, a wooden heart beating in the darkness of Nagasaki night. Each small sound contributes to the larger symphony of shelter and protection, the complex acoustic environment that tells me I am safe. I am held. I am part of something larger and more stable than individual consciousness, with its constant stream of worries and desires, and the exhausting effort of maintaining social position in a hierarchical world. Here, in the darkness, those hierarchies seem less important, more like games played during daylight hours than like fundamental truths about the nature of existence. The apprentice who folds laundry and the geisha, who entertains clients, and the clients who pay for entertainment all share the same basic needs for rest and warmth, and the renewal that comes from periodic surrender of conscious control. In sleep, we become equals, all of us subject to the same biological rhythms, all of us dependent on the same mysterious processes that restore energy and consolidate memory and prepare the body for another day of activity. This democratic aspect of sleep appeals to something deep in my nature, some part of me that chafes against the careful stratification that governs waking life in the okiya. Not that I reject the necessity of training and hierarchy and the gradual acquisition of skills and privileges, but it's restful to know that there are realms of experience where social position becomes irrelevant, where the body's needs and the mind's requirement for rest create a temporary equality that transcends the artificial distinctions that organize daily routine. My breathing has become deeper and more regular without conscious intention. My body following its own wisdom about the preparation required for deep sleep. The air that moves in and out of my lungs seems softer somehow, warmer, more perfectly suited to the needs of relaxed tissue and slowing circulation. This is air that has been filtered through the house's respiratory system, warmed by other bodies, humidified by cooking and bathing and the various domestic activities that fill living spaces with the moisture that makes them comfortable for human habitation. I think about breath itself, about the mysterious process that extracts life from air, that allows consciousness to persist in physical form, that connects my individual existence to the vast atmospheric circulation that surrounds the planet and makes all terrestrial life possible. Each inhalation brings molecules that have been breathed by countless other creatures that have participated in the photosynthesis of distant plants, that carry traces of ocean evaporation and mountain snow and the complex chemistry of a living world. This awareness of connection through breath creates a sense of participation in something vastly larger than personal circumstance. A reminder that individual life exists within nested systems of increasing scale and complexity. From the cellular processes that sustain tissue to the planetary processes that sustain the biosphere. The knowledge is both humbling and comforting, reducing personal concerns to their proper proportion, while confirming membership in the larger community of living things. The quilt has warmed to the perfect temperature now, neither too hot nor too cool, maintaining the precise degree of insulation that allows the body to relax completely without fighting temperature extremes. This kind of thermal comfort is one of the fundamental requirements for deep rest, the physical foundation that supports the mental and emotional relaxation necessary for restorative sleep. I curl deeper into the bedding, feeling my knees come closer to my chest, feeling my shoulders settle into the slight hollow that my body has created in the mattress over months of sleeping in this same position. The fetal posture seems to emerge naturally as consciousness prepares to withdraw from the external world, as if the body remembers some ancestral wisdom about the position that best supports the vulnerable state of sleep. The memory of the woman's sigh from the upper room returns briefly, that soft sound of breath carrying emotion or satisfaction or simple exhaustion into the night air. I wonder if she has found sleep by now, if her breathing has settled into the deep rhythm that indicates complete rest, if her dreams are pleasant or troubled or simply absent, leaving consciousness to dissolve entirely into the darkness that claims all awareness eventually. The thought of other people sleeping throughout the house creates a sense of communal rest. all of us participating in the collective withdrawal from waking activity that allows the building itself to rest, to recover from the day's occupancy, to prepare for tomorrow's renewal of the endless cycle of work and entertainment and the careful maintenance of beauty and social order. This shared sleep feels like a form of cooperation, each of us contributing to the house's nighttime peace by withdrawing our individual demands for attention and service, by allowing the building's systems to operate at their lowest level of activity, by creating the quiet necessary for deep restoration of both human and architectural systems. The candle flame wavers more dramatically now, casting stronger shadows that dance across the paper screens, creating brief moments of brighter illumination followed by deeper darkness as the dying wick struggles to consume the last traces of available wax. These fluctuations seem to echo the irregular rhythm of consciousness on the edge of sleep, the way awareness brightens and dims unpredictably. As the mind moves back and forth between waking attention and the deeper rest that awaits, I find myself following these fluctuations rather than fighting them, allowing my own awareness to brighten and dim in sympathy with the struggling flames, accepting the natural rhythm of approach and withdrawal that characterizes the transition from waking to sleeping states. This seems more restful than trying to force sleep to arrive according to some predetermined schedule, more respectful of the body's own wisdom about when and how consciousness should surrender its control. The tatami beneath the mattress releases a small sigh as my weight settles more completely, the woven reeds compressing slightly as my muscles relax and allow gravity to distribute my body's mass more evenly across the sleeping surface. This natural material responds to pressure differently than manufactured alternatives, giving way gradually rather than rigidly, creating a sense of being supported by something alive and responsive rather than simply functional. The sound reminds me of the larger conversation between body and environment that characterizes all comfortable rest. The way sleeping spaces learn to accommodate their occupants, while occupants learn to appreciate what sleeping spaces offer. This mutual adaptation creates the deep familiarity that makes certain places feel like homes, that allows the body to relax completely only in spaces that have learned its particular needs and preferences. My hair has spread across the pillow in patterns that follow the curves of my skull and neck, creating a soft frame around my face that adds another layer of insulation against the night's coolness. The familiar weight of it reminds me of the care that goes into maintaining it, the daily brushing, the weekly washing, the monthly treatments with special oils that keep it soft and lustrous, despite the demands of daily work and the exposure to cooking, smoke, and incense that fills the air of the okiya. This attention to personal maintenance is part of the discipline of apprentice life, the requirement to present oneself as clean and neat and worthy of eventual advancement to full professional status. But lying here in the darkness, with no one to observe or evaluate my appearance, the care of hair and skin and clothing becomes something more personal, more connected to self-respect than to external judgment. The thought of self-respect brings with it a warm feeling of accomplishment, a recognition that despite the challenges and uncertainties of apprentice life, I have maintained my health and dignity, have learned new skills while preserving the essential qualities that make me who I am. This seems worth celebrating, even if the celebration takes place only in the privacy of near sleep, even if no one else will ever know about this moment of quiet self-appreciation. The candle gives a final flicker and dies, plunging the corridor into complete darkness and removing the last visual anchor that connected me to the waking world. The sudden absence of light creates a moment of deeper silence, as if the house itself is holding its breath before settling into the profound rest that only comes when artificial illumination no longer competes with natural darkness. But my eyes have been resting closed for some time now, and the loss of external light changes nothing about the interior landscape of approaching sleep. If anything, the deeper darkness makes it easier to let go completely, to surrender the last traces of vigilant attention that might have been maintained as long as light suggested the possibility of needing to respond to visual information. Now there is only the soft acoustic environment of a house at rest, the gentle sounds of wood and paper and sleeping bodies, the whisper of air moving through spaces designed for human comfort, and the continuation of life in forms that require shelter and warmth, and the security necessary for vulnerability. These sounds create their own form of lullaby, more complex and varied than any melody, but just as effective at soothing consciousness toward rest. My breathing has synchronized with some deeper rhythm now. Perhaps the rhythm of the house itself. Perhaps the rhythm of the night beyond the house. Perhaps the rhythm of sleep itself calling from whatever realm receives. Consciousness when it withdraws from the responsibilities and pleasures of waking life. Each breath carries me deeper into relaxation, further from the concerns of daily routine, closer to whatever dreams or simple rest await in the hours before dawn. The quilt seems to breathe with me, rising and falling in gentle rhythm, creating its own small weather system of warmth and circulation that maintains perfect comfort without requiring any conscious attention or adjustment. This is one of the gifts of well-made bedding, the way it responds automatically to the body's needs, maintaining ideal conditions for rest while remaining unobtrusive enough not to disturb the delicate process of falling asleep. I think about the hands that wove this cotton, the plants that grew the fibers, the long chain of human labor and natural process that brought these simple materials together into the specific configuration that now supports my rest. Even in this most private moment, I am connected to vast networks of interdependence, benefiting from the work of people I will never meet, from the bounty of natural systems that operate according to principles I only partially understand. The gratitude I feel is physical as well as intellectual, embodied in the actual sensation of comfort and security, in the real experience of being held and warmed and protected by the accumulated wisdom of human civilization and the patient, generosity of natural systems that provide the raw materials for human survival and flourishing. This sense of being held extends beyond the immediate comfort of bedding and shelter to include the house around me, the neighborhood beyond the house, the city that contains the neighborhood, the island nation that rises from the sea to provide a foundation for the countless individual lives that unfold within its boundaries. Each level of organization contributes something essential to the conditions that make my particular existence possible. Each creates its own form of embrace that supports and protects and nourishes the lives it contains. The house holds me most immediately, its wooden walls and paper screens creating the intimate space where individual consciousness can rest and recover from the day's activities. But the house itself is held by the larger structures, social, economic, cultural, that maintain the conditions necessary for places like this okiya to exist, that preserve the traditions and skills and aesthetic values that give meaning to the work that happens here. And those larger structures are held by forces more fundamental still. The stability of geological and climatic systems, the continuation of biological processes, the mysterious laws of physics and chemistry that allow matter to organize itself into the complex forms that support consciousness and sensation and the capacity for appreciation of beauty and meaning. This nested quality of existence feels particularly vivid on the edge of sleep, when logical thinking gives way to more associative forms of awareness, when the boundaries between self and world become more fluid, more permeable to influences that waking consciousness might filter out or dismiss as irrelevant to immediate concerns. But perhaps those influences are never irrelevant. Perhaps the deep connections between individual life and larger systems remain constant, whether consciousness acknowledges them or not. Sleep might simply remove the barriers that prevent awareness of what is always true. That individual existence is sustained by participation in patterns vastly larger and more complex than personal circumstance. That the most private moments of rest and restoration depend on the health and stability of systems that extend far beyond the reach of personal control or understanding. The thought is both humbling and deeply reassuring, a reminder that whatever specific challenges tomorrow might bring, they will unfold within a context of support and connection that extends far beyond visible boundaries, that reaches back through generations of human wisdom and forward, into possibilities not yet imagined, but already prepared for by the patient work of maintaining and improving the conditions that allow conscious life to flourish. My body has achieved complete relaxation now, every muscle released. From the tensions of waking activity, every joint settled into perfect alignment with gravity and the supporting surfaces of mattress and tatami. This physical letting go creates the foundation for mental and emotional rest, the bodily peace that allows consciousness to withdraw from its constant vigilance and trust that rest will bring whatever restoration is needed for continued growth and learning. The darkness around me feels vast now, not limited to the boundaries of room or house, but extending indefinitely in all directions. connecting this small space of rest to all the other spaces where consciousness pauses in its journey through embodied experience, where the work of living temporarily gives way to the deeper work of restoration and renewal. That happens only in states of profound letting go. I am part of that larger darkness now, no longer a separate consciousness observing from outside, but an integrated element in the night's embrace, my breathing contributing to the circulation of air and life, my warmth adding to the total energy that keeps the house and its inhabitants comfortable, my rest participating in the collective withdrawal from activity that allows all systems, human and architectural and natural, to recover and prepare for continued function. The last traces of deliberate thought dissolve into the flowing awareness that precedes dreams, consciousness becoming more like water than light, the structured thinking that characterizes waking cognition. In this fluid state, boundaries become suggestions rather than barriers. Connections become visible that logical analysis might dismiss as coincidental. Patterns emerge that reveal the deeper unity underlying apparent separation. But even pattern recognition fades as sleep approaches more closely. Awareness becoming less concerned with understanding than with simply receiving whatever the night offers. Dreams or visions, or simply the profound rest that allows the body's repair systems to operate without interference from conscious intention, that gives the mind space to consolidate the day's experiences and prepare for tomorrow's opportunities for continued learning and growth. The house breathes around me one final time, and I breathe with it, part of its rhythm now, held by its wooden embrace, supported by its patient presence, protected by its accumulated wisdom about what human beings need to flourish in the complex world that consciousness inhabits when it chooses to take physical form and engage with the beautiful and challenging work of being alive in time and space, and relationship with other forms of awareness pursuing their own paths toward understanding and fulfillment. Sleep claims me gently, like water accepting another drop, like night welcoming another dreamer, like the vast community of resting consciousness receiving another member into its patient communion with mystery and rest, and the deep renewal that makes continued awakening possible and worthwhile and rich with possibilities for discovery and connection, and the ongoing creation of meaning and beauty in a world that offers endless opportunities for wonder and appreciation, and the specific joy that comes from being exactly who and where and when one is meant to be. The quilt settles more closely around my sleeping form, and the house holds us both, apprentice and bedding, dreamer and shelter, individual consciousness, and the larger patterns that support and contain and nourish all forms of life in their patient journey through the cycles of activity and rest that define existence in physical form, in relationship with time and matter and the countless other beings who share this particular moment in the vast ongoing story of consciousness exploring itself through endless forms of beauty, complexity, and the mysterious love that connects all things in networks of support and mutual care that extend far beyond the boundaries of individual understanding, but never beyond the reach of grateful participation in their patient and generous embrace.